What strange thing have you experienced that you cannot explain? I had a friend in high school who I stopped speaking to when she transferred in grade 10. 2 years later, I have a dream that I visited her new school and sat at the back of her math class with her. In the dream her teacher was tall, brunette with curly hair, and wearing glasses. The next day I get a message on Facebook from said friend, which is completely out of blue because we hadn't spoken in months. She asks me how I'm doing and I tell her about my dream. She freaks out and tells me that she sits at the back of her math class, and her teacher fit the description I gave her from my dream perfectly. Out walking around the neighborhood late at night with a friend one night, we would occasionally look up to the sky in awe of the stars. I saw a fast moving light like a meteor, but slower, although much faster than an airplane. Then, it made two sharp 90-degree turns, first to the right, then to the left and disappeared. My friend and I both stopped and said, "Did you see that?" to each other. This was in the late 80s and I can still picture it like it was yesterday. Driving from Cancun to Merida at night, about 10 years ago. Middle of the road there's a huge pothole, so I swerved to avoid it. About 200 meters ahead notice a car's got its hazard lights on. It's parked on the side of the road, so I decided to stop and check to see if they needed help. Thought it might have been a flat tire. I parked, approached the car, and as I got closer I saw what appeared to be two passengers in the back. There was no one in the driver's seat and those two figures I had seen were mannequins with wigs and faces drawn with a marker or something. Just weird. To me at least. Can't rationalize the whole event. Full stop. That drive from Cancun to Merida is one filled with weird stuff. When I was about 14. I'm 50 now. We were driving in the middle of the day when we drove into a cloud of locusts. We were in the locusts for about 5 minutes. We stopped at a Pemex gas station to clean the hundreds of smeared locusts from the front windshield. A car pulled in right behind us. The man said he had been driving behind us and he wanted to know if we were okay because of all the smoke around our RV. We showed him it was not smoke but locusts. He said he didn't see any locusts and his car was clean. About 18 months later we were again driving that section of road, but later in the day on a Sunday. We had been in Cancun for 3 days and were heading to Campeche. We were all hungry, so when we saw a woman on the side of the road selling panitis, we stopped and ate. There were 14 of us traveling in 2 RVs. We ate a lot. The woman had this weird look on her face the whole time. Kind of like surprised but pleased. She told my dad that the night before she'd had a dream that a bunch of people would be stopping to eat and she had made extra. We ate everything she had made. Driving in Mexico at night with no one around. Stops for hazard lights. Lol, you still have your kidneys, dude? Or? A few years ago me and a bunch of friends were on a cabin trip at my friend's parents' cabin. It was in the middle of nowhere and it was late, so the road was pitch black. We were split up into 2 cars, and I was driving behind the person who knew where we were going. At some point, my friend just starts speeding up, annoying fast. I start bitching that I'm barely able to keep up. Suddenly, she takes a sharp turn down into a wooded area with only a vape trail. I try to follow, but I'm desperately trying to avoid the massive potholes in my tiny not fit for off-roading car. Meanwhile, the car in front of me is gliding down the path seemingly no problem. I flash my lights for them to slow down, but nothing. I'm pissed at this point, and am cursing my friend's name while my passengers sit in silent terror. We finally make it down to real road, but my friend's car is nowhere to be seen. It was like it vanished out of thin air. Again, the area is pitch black, so if there was any source light we would be able to see it. We're lost as hell and try to call but we don't have a cell signal. We drive for about 10 minutes before we reach them, find them, and are finally guided to the cabin. I mentioned to my friend about how annoyed I am that she took a dangerous off-road path without warning us and then just disappeared. She then gets a really weird look on her face and says, "What are you talking about? You guys were right behind me and then suddenly you just turned off into the woods. We had no idea where you went. We were really worried." Apparently, she had been on the road the whole time. No one knows who the truck was, where they came from, or where they went. Everyone in both cars never saw a car pull out between us or saw us get broken up. The 3 people in my car are confident that the truck we saw led us down the woods was my friend's car. Everyone else in the other car assured us they were on the road the whole time. To this day, none of us know where that car came from or how they snuck in between 2 cars without 6 people realizing it. Maybe someone out there has a story about how they were driving late at night and these 2 cars were behaving slightly odd. They were all keeping pace with the front car not pulling away, the rear car keeping close behind and the driver's car in between. They continued like this for some time. After a while the driver became a bit uncomfortable with the situation and decided to turn off onto a little side path and let the cars pass. To their surprise, the rear car follows them and begins to pursue them down this trail. Terrified, the driver accelerates down the trail. They are putting distance between themselves and their pursuer, but the other car is still following. Desperate now, the driver takes an opportunity to pull behind some trees and brush just before the path connects to the main road. They kill the car lights and hold their breath as this mystery car races past them and down the main road. I was at a bar and I was talking to some dude I just met and a girl came over and started chatting us up. Mid-conversation, out of nowhere, she puts a hand on her head and says to the other guy, "You are from Brownsville." I don't remember the city name, but it is a small town of like 500 people. The dude looked completely dumbfounded and replied that indeed he was from that city. She said that is weird because once every 2 or 3 years she has these crazy flashes of information about people she is talking to but don't know them personally. It was really weird and the guy was blown away and I was kind of in awe. I don't believe in real psychic abilities or anything, but this tested me. Also, it could have just been fake and she really knew he was from there, but crazy experience anyway. I have a post in our Glitching Thematrix about this happening to me. My GF was telling me about working with her new co-worker, said nothing about her appearance, and all of a sudden I got a flash of intuition and it was as if I had seen her co-worker in my mind's eye. I interrupted her and asked, "Does she have curly red hair?" And it turned out she did. It's pretty minor and it could mean nothing, but it was just a powerful flash of insight that has always stuck with me. This sort of happened to me a few days ago at a birthday party. I didn't know the host very well and had briefly met a few of her other friends at a small gathering she held at the same house. At the birthday we played a game that involved getting into groups according to how we knew the party host. During the game a boy came up to me and for some reason I immediately said to him, "I know you. You're one of host's acting friends." He replied that he also recognized me and was surprised I remembered he did acting. As I went on to describe that first gathering where we had met, he became very confused. He wasn't at that gathering and had never even been to the house before. We both suddenly realized we'd never met and were actually complete strangers. I have no idea why I was so convinced I knew he was in acting. When I was about 12, I was playing outside on a really windy day and a blue flying thing the size of a water bottle zoomed into my yard and got caught in some spider web in a bush. Its wings were clear so it wasn't a bird, but the thing was huge and weird if it was a bug. I lived in the Mojave Desert CA at the time. If anyone can think of something it could have been, and freaking the fuck out tangled in the web and branches. It was thrashing so fast I couldn't get a good look at it, and I just kept staring at it in disbelief cause I couldn't stop thinking that's a fucking fairy. I go over and try to detach it from the web and it breaks free. At the speed of fuck you it was gone again. Cicadas. What's that bug web page? Can get stupid huge. I mean, yeah, they can get big, but as big as a opens link. Fuck, I shouldn't have done that. I should not have done that. If you ever get a gift from a fairy, take it, thank them, and don't engage further. Put the gift away somewhere safe. They'll repay kindness, but grudgingly, and weirdly. I woke up with sleep paralysis with the understanding my uncle died. I get a phone call around 4 AM from my mom to tell me my uncle is on his deathbed and that I should swing by in the morning. Pretty sure it was just his body on the bed, breathing on automatic, and that he left hours back. I had something kind of similar happen. My uncle had already passed the previous month or less. It was very hard for the family as he was the youngest of 8 siblings at 31 years old. I fell asleep on the couch and had a dream. I remember taking a train, and at the end, my uncle that had passed gave me a huge hug. It felt so incredibly real, and he told me everything is going to be okay. The moment I opened my eyes, my mother informed me that my Bulata, great-grandma, died. She and my uncle were ridiculously close, and it was known to everyone that my uncle was her favorite grandchild. On top of that, around when my uncle died, my Bulata started crying out of the blue. The nursing staff asked her what was wrong, and she said, "I don't know why, but I have a great sadness in my heart." She had very severe Alzheimer's, and my family decided it would cause unnecessary pain to tell her that my uncle died, so she never knew. Damn. This comment hit me so hard. When my sister died unexpectedly at 17 years old, it was so hard on my family that we all spent the night in the living room of my parents' house together. That night, I had the most real and vivid dream I have ever had. My sister was sitting on a rock in the middle of an open field of yellow grass. She grabbed my hand and said, "Everything is going to be okay." I woke up, and both the dogs were whining. The smoke detector starts beeping like the battery is dead, but only like 5 times. And then my mother bolts awake. She had had the very same dream. I was sitting in my college dorm room once when the temperature suddenly started dropping like crazy. I turned the heat up as high as it would go, but it just kept getting colder. I took out my winter clothes and started putting them on. This was like in late September, early October in New York, so it wasn't cold outside at all. I was just about to go ask for maintenance when my roommate got back from hockey practice and asked why there were so many police cars and ambulances outside. I had no idea. Later that night, we were informed a girl who lived in the dorms had died. Everyone who I've told about this says that I felt her death. I was in that same room for 3 years, and that was the only time I ever had problems with the temperature. Something kinda similar happened to my brother about 10 years ago. He was doing a year of foreign exchange study at a university in Japan and was living in a dorm. One night, he had just gotten into bed when he felt someone grip tightly onto his arm with 2 hands. He got so freaked out he got up and went out to a 24-hour McDonald's for the rest of the night. Turns out that night, a girl in one of the dorms had hung herself. Somewhat related, my grandpa had a good relationship with the deer who lived around him. In the final minutes of life, dozens of deer all visited his house and stood outside. As soon as he passed, they left. Had never happened before. Not in those numbers. A few years ago, shortly after adopting my dog, By then GF and I were getting ready to go out for food, or whatever it was. Right as we are getting ready to go out the door, our dog starts freaking out. He's losing his mind, whining, jumping at us, biting at our arms, and trying to pull us to the living room. We take a few extra seconds, calm him down, say goodbye and head out. We had a train to catch. Took all of 30-60 seconds. As we were approaching the bus stop, about 30 seconds away from the stop, a BMW comes barreling around the corner and jumps the curb exactly where we would have been standing. Had we left when we originally wanted, we would have been standing there. We never would have seen it coming. To this day I'm convinced my dog knew, and he delayed us for that reason. He's never had an outburst like that since. Years ago my dad's uncle passed away. Years before that, said uncle got my parents a fancy bottle of tequila from Mexico, and it's been on the front room display shelf with a bunch of other dust-covered sculptures and glasswork for at least 12 years. It's out of reach and untouched. No one in my immediate family drinks. On the day of his passing, I'm in the front room reading and my dad's doing his taxes. We get a phone call with the bad news. My dad continues his taxes while letting me know his uncle passed in a few short words. Not 30 seconds later, in the tequila bottle his uncle got my parents starts playing music. This is odd to me because I thought it was just a bottle, so I ask, do we have a music box? My dad continues his taxes and tells me the bottle has a music box built in, and that was the only reason he kept it. I clarify, did you wind it recently? And he just keeps filing and says nope, and I was ready to leave it at that, but he says still all casually occupied. I imagine Uncle David wanted to say goodbye one last time. That is the only time it has made a noise as long as I've been alive. Of all days and times, I never knew what to make of it. It just made me uncomfortable. Sounds like your dad has some stories to contribute to this thread. How could he be that numb to such a wild event? Some people play it cool in front of others and break down later by themselves. It's not unusual. When my grandmother died, I never saw my uncle shed a tear. He was his same old self, plus some extra jokes here and there. Everyone grieves differently. Exactly. Plus we are talking about a father and son. There is a lot of expectation on men to be very stoic even in a crisis. I came out of a store one day and turned the corner to see a crow trying to read a paperback novel on a park bench. He was perched on the bench, turning pages with his beak. When he noticed me staring, he hopped away like I caught him red-handed, and took flight a moment later. Ended up getting a tattoo of a crow reading a book because the incident left such an impression on me. No one really seems to believe me. But dude, corvids are fucking smart. I figure it was either imitating a person, or trying to harvest the pages for a nest. But either way, strange experience. Edit. Since a couple people asked and missed my reply, here's the tattoo. Imgur webpage. Super smart. When I was in India I was hanging outside of my hotel and there was a huge crow trying to get the wrapper off a minute candy bar. I thought it was pretty weird that a crow had found an entire unwrapped chocolate bar. But I got up, walked over and opened the wrapper. I expected the crow to take off, but she just chilled, waiting to see what I was going to do. Crow took off with the bar when I dropped it in front of him. About a minute or two later the crow came back and very pointedly dropped a live fish in front of me. It was either as a thank you or he wanted to see what I'd do with the fish. It was a thank you. There are a few stories out there with people feeding crows and after a while, they start bringing gifts. This bartender I think had a blog or something about it. He'd give them peanuts and pretzels and a couple started bringing buttons and bits of shiner rocks. Apparently throwing raw, Shell on peanuts in your yard is a good way to befriend your neighborhood crows. They'll sometimes bring you small objects they find, and return things you lose nearby. Edit. The very next comment I saw linked to the article I was thinking of, BBC webpage. I've seen crows do crazy things. They mimic human actions, but the weird part is how they seem to try and understand the action too. There was the one story about the one that saw people paying a kiosk for food. He saw paper being handed over and food being received. He started picking up paper scraps and dropping them on the counter. Eventually he started pinching banknotes out of people's hands to give to the kiosk. I've been noticing crows going for weird thrill rides in front of my car. It's almost always one at a time, but there are always more gathered nearby. It's like they're playing a game of who can fly closest in front of the moving vehicle. They even laugh if one gets hit. It's like haha Kevin got smashed lol. In DC, they're trained crows to pick up trash from the street and place it into trash bins. They are very intelligent animals. In the summer I sometimes volunteer as a cabin leader at a summer camp for youth, some of whom are troubled. Last summer we had a kid who got random fits of rage and he would take it out on anything he could. We later found out he had hid his meds from the staff nurse because he came on a bus without any guardians. Obviously this withdrawal had major side effects. His fits started to get more and more extreme. And one day during the daily nap time he erupted at full force and started breaking everything he could and ran out of the cabin, and I was sadly the only person there at the time due to a staff meeting that was occurring. I called another cabin leader who was in the cabin next to ours, and he ran out to find the camper because at this point my whole cabin of about 10 kids were panicking and worried. So I felt uncomfortable leaving them alone. During and after the fit a few of my heavier sleepers stayed asleep, and about 5 minutes later one of them woke up crying and screaming. Most young boys have a sort of pride issue with crying in front of other boys their age. So he asked if he could talk to me along on the cabin's porch. I agreed and walked him out, telling the other campers to try to go back to sleep. He ended up telling me that he was having a nightmare about a skeleton. He didn't say much else about the dream because that wasn't the bad part. The bad part was that he ended up describing to me what was essentially sleep paralysis. I told him about it and he had no idea what it was and was begging me to call his mom to come get him because he said he felt like something was there trying to get him. I ended up researching sleep paralysis with him and showed him everything I could to assure him that nothing was out to get him and explained the science behind it. Here's where it gets weird and still freaks me out to this day. We later had a staff meeting for those who missed the earlier one. And I found out that while all of this was happening, another boys' cabin and a girls' cabin on the other side of camp each had a camper wake up with sleep paralysis, both describing different nightmares, both having to do with a skeleton. I also later had found out that the cabin leader who had went looking for our runaway camper had found him in a grove of trees talking what he called gibberish, and he was hitting a stick against a tree. We called his parents who explained his situation in more detail, and we found out about him hiding the meds, and we got him calmed down and the rest of the week went smoothly. After he left we ended up finding a small drawing pad we had seen him using throughout the weeks with very strange drawings in it. Nothing looked like anything. There wasn't anything graphic or anything about them that was threatening. But for some reason it just seemed unsettling to us all. Almost like the drawings extremely young children do when they scribble. We called his parents and we offered to ship it to them, but they said he didn't want it. A more skeptical cabin leader ended up burning it because of the situations that happened in the week. I don't really get scared by supernatural stuff, but this was honestly the weirdest, scariest thing I've ever seen my entire life, and I wouldn't even believe it had I not witnessed it myself, and the horror in everyone's faces that were involved. My story isn't nearly as strange as some of the others, but it's one that has stuck with me my whole life. My friend and I used to love to go and hang out in one of the local cemeteries. I guess because we were just weird. This was an older cemetery and was no longer used, so it didn't have any new graves in it. One day while we were hanging out and just wandering around, we stumbled upon a new looking grave marker. It stuck out like crazy because all of the other markers were old and grey and crumbling. On some of them you could barely make out the names. This marker was much newer and the name and dates was clearly visible. It was also a rather neat red marble color, which was really different from all of the others. We didn't think much of it and just continued our trip through the cemetery. We sat down under this big tree in the middle and talked and laughed and did other stupid kid things. After an hour or so we decided it was time to leave. We crossed right by where the new grave marker had been and it was gone. We both kind of freaked out a little bit and searched the whole graveyard looking for the brand new marker, and it wasn't there. We checked for it several more times on different visits and never found it again. It was just weird and something neither of us could ever explain. Graveyards are weird, and not necessarily in the supernatural sense, just the planning. The similar but not same gravestones. Sometimes this eerie feeling that you know how to find your way to the grave you're looking for no matter how chaotic the planning is, but have problems finding anything else. Bit similar to your case. I was in a graveyard with friends once and saw this really cool gravestone. Went back 2 days later by myself. Almost 2 hours looking. Can't find it. It wasn't even a big cemetery, and I remembered it was on one of 3 short paths going down a slope, and I had a picture on my phone. Felt like an idiot. And then I found it. Still felt like an idiot, of course. But yes, cemeteries are weird. Something similar happened to me and my friend some years ago. We used to hang out at the old graveyard as well, and one day we came across an old, very old grave that we never saw before. You could not make out the dates or anything. I don't even recall you could read the name anymore. The stone was very withered and the grave just was in a desolate condition. Like overgrown. Not tended after in years, etc. For whatever reason we kinda liked this particular unknown grave and would keep on visiting it each time we came to the graveyard. We would remove leaves from it, tidy it up a bit, bring something to drink and drank to our unknown dead friend. That continued for a few weeks until one day when we came back, we couldn't find it anymore. We went where it was supposed to be, we knew where it should be, but there was nothing. Just grass and dirt. No sign that there ever was a grave to begin with. So it wasn't moved, relocated or anything. It was just untouched ground there. We still talk about it. We still visit the old graveyard at least once a year. But we could never find the grave again. I've posted somewhere else about this, but it fits. When I was a teenager we went to our local cemetery to visit our granddad's grave. On the way back to the car I saw one of those little white crosses on a grave. The kind you put on before you get a headstone. The horizontal but with the name had fallen off onto the grave. I felt bad seeing it, so I picked it up and put it back onto the cross. That night, I woke up and at the end of my bed I saw a guy sitting in a chair with his head thrown back. His throat looked like it was cut or something. It was an awful mess. He had brown hair, a blue shirt and jeans on. I was absolutely terrified and screamed out for my parents. They came into the room and it had gone. I haven't touched anything in a graveyard since. Edit. Just to clarify, I do touch things in the graveyard nowadays of the person I am visiting. Flowers etc. But if it doesn't belong to the person I am visiting, then no deal, mate. One time, as I was driving home from work, I turned onto the street where I live on and noticed what seemed to be more street lights than I remember being there. I didn't think much of it at all at first, but something in me made me do a double take. I noticed that the 3 additional street lights are not street lights at all, but lights lined up perfectly in the sky in the distance. Literally, as soon as I noticed this, the lights in the sky beginning moving slowly and getting closer together. Eventually, they were close enough and formed a triangle. Mind you, at this point I have managed to park my car in my driveway and I'm standing there staring at them. My parents, who are fairly religious, tend not to believe in aliens, UFOs or anything of the sort, so I decided to run inside and get them so they can see this for themselves. We go back outside, the lights are still hovering, moving slowing in a triangle, no sound is being made by them. They do this for a few more seconds and all of a sudden, one of them speeds off super quickly. When I say quick, I mean quick. The remaining to continue moving slowly in the sky for a few more seconds, then they literally just vanish. Poof, the lights were just gone. I'm not saying it was aliens, but yeah, those really were unidentified flying objects. To this day, we have no idea what they might possibly be. Wow, I can't believe someone has had such a similar experience to myself. When I lived in MA, I was hanging outside with my buddy on a community golf course and we saw 3 orbs slowly come over the horizon. About halfway through the sky they all shifted and formed a triangle. The formation held for a while with no movement and then illuminated purple on all edges of the triangle, while the center stayed dark. The orbs then dispersed and slowly went back over the horizon. I had a few more similar experiences over the course of that month. I'm still scratching my head. They were just dropping off Mitt Romney for a campaign event, I'd guess. Okay, what the fuck? I've seen this. I was about 12, in the Cub Scouts and we were doing astronomy on Bodmin Moor, UK. We used to do things like track satellites and then write off to the Met Office, give the time, inclination, etc, and they'd tell us what satellite we'd been looking at. One night, we saw exactly what you described. I noticed without the aid of the telescope and initially, just thought my eyes were playing tricks, but the triangular formation of lights seemed to be moving uniformly, albeit slowly, and then all of a sudden, they zipped off toward the horizon, like, from 0 to 5,000 instantly. They disappeared almost immediately. The Cub Scout master looked freaked out, but us kids loved it, saying we'd just seen a real UFO. We duly sent off the info to the Met Office but never received a response. Even after repeatedly requesting the info, the Met Office had never not responded before. Fucking weird to see you describe exactly what I saw. It's 4:53 in the morning in Southern California right now. It's dark. I'm sitting in my bed after waking up, and right at 4:50 while I'm reading your post after having read all this other scary shit here, my closed bedroom door begins to rattle. Then I realized my bed was shaking and it was just a small earthquake. Explained. But a hell of a creepy time to get one. I saw this, exactly as you described, right down to them forming a triangle, then one speeding off super quickly. This happened in a park in southeast London, around 2003. I always figured it was military planes practicing maneuvers or something similar, but it still creeps me out a little bit. On a boat, trolling for yellowtail amidst a school of dolphin about 4 miles off San Diego. Dolphin are too smart to take lures, aren't shy near small boats, and feed on the same bait schools as yellowtail and tuna, so it's strategic to follow them. As if cued, all 50-75 dolphins simultaneously stopped jumping and disappeared into the depths for about 30 seconds. Immediate, unnerving quiet, with great fanfare. They all suddenly burst out of the water in a near perfect row about a football field wide, and for a while, synchronized jumps ahead of our boat. Then they were gone. Showing off for my dad and I. Normal behavior? Who knows? But it was awesome. Sounds like a hunting tactic. Dolphins are highly coordinated pack hunters and use fairly complicated maneuvers. Hey, you know what would freak out those humans? If we all disappeared, and then jumped out in a line. Frank, that's stupid. You have a better idea, Carl. Fine. On 3. Maple Dragon 14 is correct. This is a hunting tactic. The bait fish that they feed on in those waters congregate near the surface, and while fish are excellent at seeing in most directions, they have a big blind spot below them. The random jumping you were witnessing was them pushing the bait fish into a bait ball. Youta web page. They scare them in particular directions by picking off smaller fish on the edges, forcing the bait fish toward the center of the school into a tighter formation, or bait ball. Once that is done, the dolphins retreat into the depths so they can attack the ball from below. They move with such speed that they breach the surface in a spectacular jump. The first dolphin that hits scares the rest of the bait fish, and the bait ball usually makes a straight line in what they think is a safe direction, where another dolphin ascends from below, through the ball with its mouth wide open, catching all the fish it can, as fast as it can, until it also breaches the surface, and it continues like this until the dolphins have their fill, or until the feeding ball needs herded back together again. My mother passed away in 2008. When she finally passed and gave up the ghost, my 2 brothers and I were all holding on to her and doing our best to comfort her. At the foot of the bed, both my dog and her dog, both Jack Russells, were both very still and staring at her, and when she finally passed, both dogs' heads went up and over to the corner ceiling. They were in complete unison as they watched something go up and out of that bedroom. I'm not a religious person, but I find comfort in what I saw that afternoon. I lived for several years in a house built in 1850. At the time I had 2 dogs. They saw things there all the time. They'd be asleep on the couch, then they'd wake up and both of them would follow something moving across the room, and of course there was nothing there. This happened regularly. The house was definitely haunted. Things would disappear and periodically I'd hear footsteps upstairs when I was in the house alone. Yeah, your dogs saw something for sure. Like other people, I occasionally have very prophetic dreams. They always are about something tragic, but I'll describe my most vivid one. About 5 years ago I had a dream I was in a horrible 3-car accident with my then GF and my younger brother. The car was totaled. There was smoke. My GF and my brother went to the hospital and I died because I was pierced through the head with some sort of rod. Fast forward 2 years later, and my brother and I get a ride from girlfriend to go to a graduation party for a mutual friend. GF pulls out into an intersection. I immediately recognize everything from the dream and I flinch to the left. Everything goes black for me for a few seconds after that. But when I regain consciousness I look around and see the exact same scene as in my dream, except I lived. The car we were in was totaled. There was smoke from the other 2 cars involved and a rod that went through the windshield about 6 inches to the right of my head. It was the most intense moment of my life. Since then I have always kept track of my dreams and paid very close attention to them. Glad you were able to react so fast thanks to your future revealing dream. They can be a real lifesaver. If only we all had them. If only we all remembered them. Though usually the important ones will repeat until they stand out, and often the really weird ones that stand out are the ones with important messages that we need to remember. Used to get a lot more frequent deja vu as a kid. From time to time, I'll get that feeling again and it's almost like trying to remember what happens next in a movie. Wow, that's crazy. I have the same thing except mine have never been of any importance. I don't dream very often, but the majority of the times that I do, it's always some super simple and mundane task like getting chips out of the pantry, filling up a water bottle, having a conversation with someone, etc. I'll usually forget about the dream and then a couple of days or weeks later, I'll find myself in the exact scenario from my dream and get this intense moment of deja vu. It's so weird because it's been stuff as basic as viewing a particular Reddit page before. As an example, I've been watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine recently, and several days ago I had a dream where I was just sitting at my computer watching the show. I woke up and thought that's weird, I don't remember ever seeing that episode. Fast forward a few days and I'm sitting at my computer one night watching the exact scene from my dream play out. It's so weird. Not as intense, but the same type of thing happened to me. I have deja vu all the time. Usually it's random nonchalant things like conversations or reading something. But this one time it saved me from getting robbed. My deja vu is like when real life syncs up with my dreams. Like I can see what's about to happen as my memory of the dream is triggered. So I was living in Brazil at the time and a friend of mine and I were walking back to our place late one night when I realized that in my dream we kept walking down the street and were robbed, or worse. I tell him and just like in the dream he says that he has a bad feeling about it. We took another, longer, but better late, way home and made it just fine. It was 100% real though. I remember every detail of those 5 minutes. Both memories, my dream and the real experience, like both memories happened. TLDR had a dream I got robbed, had deja vu so I took another way home and wasn't robbed. As a child, back in my home country, I used to sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and talk to 3 persons near the foyer of our house, 2 men and a woman, in their mid-20s or early 30s. Every once in a while I would wake up in the middle of the night, walk to the foyer and talk with these 3. I still remember how they were positioned, always the same. But I don't remember the conversations or their nature. Only in my mid or late teens did I begin to question who those 3 were. I would ask my parents sometimes and they would say there was no one else in the house but us, our maid and my uncle who lived in the attic. Big house. And I am certain I never saw my uncle or our maid among the 3. I am 29 now and I still sometimes think about it. I'm a police officer. One night we get a call about some banging noises in the wall of the bathroom in a shitty apartment building. The banging has been going on for a few hours and it's reported to sound like someone banging on the other side of the wall. The people who live in this unit are a husband and wife and their young son, maybe 10 years old or so. A couple of us attend this call and when we get there, we hear the banging. It's not continuous, but it happens in 4 or 5s, every few minutes or so. It sounded like how it was reported, like someone banging their fist against the wall. It's extremely loud and forceful. I can't remember for sure, but I think it made the mirror in the bathroom fall off. It was definitely making the items on the bathroom shelf shake. We go out and knock on the door of the apartment next door, next to where the bathroom would be. Dude answers and lets us in. Can hear the banging still, but not nearly as loud. It's clearly nobody in that unit banging on the wall. We can't figure it out. We entertain thoughts of an animal or something being stuck in the wall. But then how did it get there? Plus the forcefulness of the banging didn't add up to an animal. A person stuck in the wall? Nope. We call the fire department. By this time, mostly everybody on the whole floor is out in the hall, seeing what the hell is going on. Of course everyone is joking that it's a ghost. The people who live in the unit say they've heard the banging before, but not to this extent. It's never gone on as long or been as loud or forceful. As a joke, someone shouts out, "If you want us to leave, knock 3 times right away." There are 3 sharp bangs. Not even joking. Everybody is freaked out by this point. I'm walking around the unit, just seeing if anything else is out of the ordinary. I see a laundry basket on the bed of one of the bedrooms, which shares a wall with a bath. A few of the bangs are so forceful, they made the basket on the bed shake. The kid says the banging is more frequent when he is near the bathroom. Weird shit, right? So the firemen arrive. They think it's a big joke, but when they hear the banging and it can't be explained, they are puzzled as well. I can't remember why, but it was determined that the sound wasn't originating from the pipes or anything else in the wall. The firemen decide to cut a small hole in the wall. Honestly, I don't even want to be there for when they do that. I've never believed in ghosts or demons or anything or that sort, but I was actually scared about what may be in the wall. So they cut a small hole in the wall. What do they find? Absolutely nothing. Nothing is in there. It's hollow. They shined a light in there and tried to shove their phone in there to take photos, but nothing was seen. The only weird thing was that when they used a heat sensor, one part of the wall was hotter than the rest. The banging basically died down at this point. We told the occupants to call us if it started up again, but it never did, or at least they never called us again. On a follow-up a few days later, they said they called a medium or someone of that sort, and while they were doing their thing, the banging happened again. Very intensely, but just for a few minutes. Last I heard the occupants moved out and we haven't heard anything since. I have no good explanation for this and neither does anyone else. Maybe it's not ghosts, I don't know, but I'm of the opinion it's something supernatural, and this is what made me a believer. Cutting a bit of the wall makes so much sense, but it's so terrifying, and the fact it was hollow makes the heat signature very interesting. Was this in Canada? Years ago I watched a YouTube video where the same thing was happening, and that's all I remember about the details. Haven't been able to find it again. When I was about 10 years old we lived at my grandparents' house for about a year. My grandpa uses hearing aids and usually has the TV volume really loud, and his favorite things to watch are westerns. One night I woke up because he was watching TV too loud. I remember hearing glasses clanking, people chatting and faint music. So at the time I pictured it to be saloon in a western film. So I starting heading downstairs to ask him to turn it down. I get downstairs, crossed the family room and kitchen and headed down the short hallway that led to the TV room. Right when I entered the TV room the noises all fell silent. I was really tired and confused. I quickly went upstairs to my room and woke up my sister, but she just brushed it off and told me to let her sleep. When I think about it now it creeps me out, but at the time I was just tired and confused. I had this, but when I was on my way to bed, went downstairs to grab a glass of water, and you have to walk past the living room door to get to the kitchen, and I heard what sounded like a dinner party in the living room. Soon as I walked in it went dead quiet, nope, straight upstairs. This is actually a pretty common audio hallucination if you're very tired or stressed. Something sort of similar happened to me when I was young. There was a short power outage during the night, and when the power went on again, the TV turned on automatically. Some TV are designed to turn off automatically after a determined period of time if you don't interact with them. So maybe that's what happened to you. The timing is still strange, though. Similar thing happened to me when I was younger. We had just gotten a Super Nintendo. and my brother and I were playing a file together. I wake up on a Saturday and he's not in his bed. We shared a room. It's still super early so everyone else is asleep, but I hear the TV on and music from the game. As I round the corner I can hear his pressing buttons and stuff and got upset that he was continuing our file without me. But as soon as the TV and where he would be sitting come into view I hear the TV turn off. It was an old CRT so it has a very specific sound when powering down. He's not anywhere. AMD the TV isn't warm at all. Confused I'd go back to the bedroom and he's tangled up in his blankets fast asleep. There's no way I couldn't have seen him there, and no way he could have snuck past me. I used to play Pokemon on the Game Boy for so long that when I switched it off I could still hear the in-game music in my head. Maybe you were all gamed out and hallucinating? I had a dream when I was a teenager. We lived on the hillside overlooking the city. I was standing on our terrace just watching the world die. Water covered most of the city. What wasn't drowned was burning. Pillars of smoke covered the horizon. But oddly enough it was serene. You couldn't hear screaming or chos, just tinder snapping like a campfire along the shore. It smelled like the sea too. Then I looked to my right, and there was my dad. To his right was my paternal grandmother. They both just smiled a sad smile which made me realize that I couldn't move. We were stuck standing in mud. I woke up after that. After breakfast, I didn't say anything until my dad and I were the only ones left at the table. I asked him if he had a dream last night. He described the exact same thing and he said he saw me too. Later on that day, my dad, who had checked in with my grandmother, said that she had the exact same dream. Holy shit. That's a very specific dream to have been had by 3 different yet related people. I ran right through one of my mom's dreams. One morning she told me she had dreamed of my deceased uncle, that she was sitting in a white room at a white table with him and they both wore white. She said she saw someone running by in the background, coming in one door and running out the door on the other side. I was floored because I had dreamed I was running away from someone, and entered a building. Within was a white room. On the far end was a white table where my mom was sitting, facing me, and on the other side of the table, facing away from me, was a dark-haired man. They were both wearing white. I ran out the other side of the room, back outside and continued on with my own dream. Okay, no, wait, what the fuck? My dad has had this exact same dream almost. He said he was in his office, looking out the window. Everything was silent but the world was ending, with everything on fire. To his right stood his father and to his left was my elder brother. I am not fucking joking around right now, holy shit. Edit. Before anyone asks, I haven't asked my brother if he's had the same dream, as he is in Canada. Ghost Legos. I was a kid playing with Legos and noticed a few were in the bucket that didn't look like mine. The plastic was faded, older, definitely of a different generation. I would build spaceships all day, then when I went to bed and woke up there'd be holes in the spaceships where the old bricks would be. Being a 7-year-old, my biggest concern was all the air getting out and my crew suffocating before they went to battle, so I'd quickly pull them apart and put new bricks in where the old ones were. But now that I think about it, that always stuck with me as odd. When my wife was working late one night, I heard breathing in the house, like a dog had somehow gotten in. I couldn't place where it was coming from, so I slowly went through the house looking everywhere. I checked our children's bedrooms and turned up nothing. But I was freaked out enough that I stayed up until my wife came home. Over the next couple of weeks we both experienced this breathing that we referred to as the breathing man. She heard it in the lunch room while I was sleeping. I heard it other times when I was on my own. But it never happened when we were awake in the house together. One night she's out working again and I'm about to go to sleep when I hear this breathing. So I sit up on the edge of the bed and say something to the effect of, "Look, I don't know what you want or why you're here, but whatever it is, get on with it. Just get on with it and get it over and done with and fuck off. And whatever it is, do it to me. Leave the kids out of this and do whatever it is you want to me and do it now. Hurry up and get the fuck on with it, and if you're not going to do anything then just fuck off entirely." And basically continued in that vein for 5, 10, 15 minutes. I'm not really sure. I waited and nothing happened. We never heard from the breathing man again after that night. Whenever spooky shit happens to my friend he tells them to fuck off, and that usually ends it too. Interesting phenomenon. I wonder if there are a lot of spirits who are just checking things out, didn't realize there were annoying people, and after being confronted with 147 F-bombs are clutching their ghost pearls and saying, "My word, I have never been spoken to in such a manner. I am leaving. Thank you. I will now and forever see an exorcism that works as an old lady ghost saying, 'Well, I never,' and stomping away." Me and my dad both witnessed a white figure fly across our backyard in 1999. It didn't have arms or legs or a face. It was basically like a sheet, and it flew across the yard at superhuman speed. When we saw it we both looked at each other and tried to make sense of it. We still talk about it today. I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain what this was. Looked like a ghost if you believe in that. The way you described it just makes you think of a big white bird swooping down. Possibly caught in a bag or a sheet. Totally unrelated, but have you seen my white bed sheets? Lost it somewhere around 1999. Just flew out the window. I was walking down Commercial Avenue in Vancouver, which is like the alternative neighborhood there. This was like 15 years ago. Just walking down the street and it was pretty busy as usual. Out of the blue, I see a fully nude woman walking down the sidewalk toward me. I remember her so vividly because I was so surprised, and also she was super hot. But the thing I remember the most is that no one else reacted. Nobody was turning their heads. I saw nobody like elbowing their friend and pointing. People were just calmly walking past her and she strolled calmly down the sidewalk. She walked right past me. Insert Patrick Stewart I saw everything gif. And I spun around as she did. Again. People seemed to just be casually getting out of her way, but no reactions. Conversations continued as she passed people. Not a single other head turned. I dunno. Commercial Drive is known for hippies and alternative lifestyle types, but I can't explain the absolutely zero reaction from people. By contract, years later, I visited Haight-Ashbury neighborhood in San Francisco and saw a guy walking down the street with just a tiny loincloth on, and everybody was pointing, laughing, spinning their heads and having big, obvious reactions. So with the nude girl, I don't know how to explain it, but some part of me thinks I saw a ghost. A hot, sexy nude ghost. I know this sounds like total BS, but I cannot express how real this was. I consider myself a honest person, and integrity is a value I take very seriously. I simply cannot explain this. In 2005 I was around 11 or 12. My family had just left church sometime between 12 o'clock and 12:30 and we're on our way home. We were driving down the road approximately a mile away from the house and I'm in the back seat listening to music. One of the houses we were passing by has a fairly large yard, the majority of it being clear of any trees or plants. As we continue down the road, I'm looking out the window at houses and everything. Not really paying attention to anything. I start looking ahead of the vehicle and where we're driving. and I notice an older lady in a white nightgown just standing on the side of the road, in that yard, facing us. I immediately think that something is off about this considering there is no one else around, and she was literally standing on the side of the road just barely out of the way of traffic, so I watch her for a total of about 7 seconds. I keep my eyes on her as we start getting closer and I start seeing details of the gown she's wearing. Blue floral patterns with some lace around the shoulders. The reason I remember this so well will be clear soon. She has short and curly white hair, and her eyes appeared to be almost completely black. Either her actual eyeballs were completely black, or the entire area surrounding her eyes were black. This detail is the only thing I can't recall perfectly. The thing that stuck out to me the most about this woman was the fact that she was my grandmother. Every detail described her: the gown she always wore, her hair, her frailness. I sat staring at her and completely turned around in my seat as we passed. She turned to look at me as well. I did not say a single word to anyone for the next few minutes that it took to get to the house. As soon as we parked in the garage, got out of the vehicle, and began walking into the house, my phone rang. Typing this for the first time is not a sensational feeling. My dad, parents divorced and I lived with my mom at the time, was calling to let me know that my grandma passed away at around 10:30 that morning. I did not know of her passing prior to that phone call. The craziest thing about this is that even though I had a very close relationship to my grandma and saw her frequently, I felt completely at peace with the fact that she was gone. She was suffering from leukemia for some time and I felt as though that pain had stopped. Me at 11 years old had to console my sobbing dad and tell him that everything was alright. Freaks me out every time I think about it. When I was around 10 I had just gotten home after playing outside all day. I lay down next to our wall heater and take my windbreaker off. As I lay there I was playing with the arm opening, just stretching it open and close. In the middle of doing it I swear to God the jacket just quickly slid towards the wall as if someone threw it. I immediately got up and slept in between my mom and dad. Still get goosebumps and still can't explain it. If your windbreaker was made of polyester then it could have been reacting to the heat of the wall heater. Polyester shrinks when exposed to direct heat and looks like it's alive while it starts to contract, melt etc. That's what I love about Reddit right here. I read these stories that terrify me, then a good soul like you comes along and gives this completely reasonable scientific explanation for what seems like a paranormal phenomenon. I go from wanting not to sleep to being completely at ease with each comment post. Polyester is made from the souls of dead dinosaurs and when exposed to sufficient levels of heat awaken the tormented spirits within who lash out at the living from their eternal clothy prisons. This can make it look like it's alive when it starts to contract, writhe, etc. Sitting next to a friend at a camp-out canoe trip, I said I just feel like I need to move, like I shouldn't be sitting here. He didn't move so I laughed a little at myself and kept sitting there. A couple of minutes later my brain pinged me again and I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna move. As soon as I stood up, a ball of fire from a flow arts performer on the other side of the camp landed exactly where I was sitting. We were both like, oh. That was probably one of those things where your brain notices something that could be dangerous, but doesn't think of it as a priority. Then suddenly, hey, that thing that wasn't so dangerous is now very dangerous. Like when you're at an intersection and decide not to go the second the light turns green and someone goes barreling through their red light. It's usually the same thing. Your brain is like, whoa dude, no, but doesn't tell you why. Once I was hanging out at a friend's house. We were going to watch a movie back in the day when you actually had to put movies into things to watch them. but as everyone there was super high, no one wanted to move. I figured if I didn't do it right then, it would never happen. So leapt up to put in the movie, and as soon as I did, a giant cockroach fell off the ceiling and right onto the spot where I had been sitting on the couch. Not scary, just disgusting. Edit again. And up top this time, because I'm kinda tired of repeating myself. Also really cool to hear other people report the same thing I saw. No lights. Not one light. Not 3 lights. But zero lights of any shape, kind, or color. None. Deen. Ingen. Kina. Hakuna. Dart. No sound. Solid black triangle. Not a boomerang shape. Not a triangle with a dick on the front. It was in 2005 or 2006. Then again around 2009. So, full disclosure, I lived in Roswell, NM 4 years. I'm not the only person who saw this. My, now ex-husband, a friend of ours, and other people who were outside at the time saw this. The first time. I do not think it was a UFO, and you damn well know what I mean. Mr. and Mrs. Pedantic. I think it was military. After all, there are many Air Force bases in NM. So it's around 10 or 11 PM. And we're outside at a bar. Not drunk. In fact, my husband and our friend hadn't had anything but soda. I think I'd had 1 margarita at this point. There is a black, triangular object moving across the sky overhead. No lights. No sound. It looked huge, but of course, the size of objects in the sky can be deceiving. The only reason we could see it was because it blocked out the stars. We're all just like, WTF. It flies off. We go inside, and are like, yep, that just happened. We file that in our mental weird shit in the sky bin. I've seen other things too, but my memory isn't as clear on them as it's been many years now. But I can write that in a separate reply maybe. A few years later, my husband is outside our house, watering the lawn. It's around 9/10 PM. He yells at me to come outside. The same object is in the sky again. We just stared. Neither of us had a smartphone yet. Heck, I'm not even sure we owned a digital camera at the time. If other patrons at the bar hadn't seen whatever that was, I'd have been like, yeah, right. And then for us to see it twice, the lack of sound is really the part that gets me. No sound before, during, or after it passed overhead. I'm from Roswell. I see weird stuff all the time. Don't really think they're UFOs, but pretty sure there's government stuff going in. Whoa. I swear I remember seeing something similar. I was in Washington State. I remember the stars being blacked out and a huge shape. I thought rectangle, but I couldn't see it all. Blocked the stars. No lights on the edges or anything. It was silent as well. Basically same story. I thought I was crazy. I'm in Washington State as well and saw something just as you described 10 or 11 years ago. I will never forget how tripped out I was that something apparently that large could be completely quiet. I was in a group of 4 people and we all watched it until it passed completely over us. Super weird. I can smell if someone is sick. To me it seems like your body gives off a specific smell when it is fighting something. I have done this twice. Told my father that 2 of his friends had a death smell. He didn't believe me. They both died. So people can truly smell sickness. Actually, I've heard this from military medics and nurses alike, that there is a smell near death. According to them, your body prioritizes living so it stops fighting bacteria and molds and such things toward the end to put everything into trying to stay alive. That's why there is that old people smell. Work in a hospital. Can confirm. It's not a for sure thing, but there's a stench. 2 days before my grandpa succumbed to cancer, his sick room was filled with a horrible odor. He hadn't soiled himself and he was having bedbugs. It was like sweaty, unwashed skin with a weird underlying sweetness. The closest I can describe it is when you haven't taken your watch off for a while and the way the skin smells underneath. I don't think anyone else noticed it. It was completely gone the next day. Weirded me out real bad. I have smelled this too on sick dying people. The first time I smelled it was in childhood when our dog was dying. Then again when I visited the home of a family friend who had cancer. The other people who I was with couldn't smell it, but to me it was the most perverse odor. The smell is, I can imagine the smell really clearly, initially musky and has undertones of a rancid unsettling rotten note, but also acidic kind of like spew, but not quite. Last year I smelled this smell coming from my body. It really worried me. However, it only lasted a couple of days and then it disappeared. This was during a very depressed phase in my life. Realizing that I had started to smell like sickness kicked me out of my funk. I can't smell when people are sick, but I can always smell when my sister is going to go into a manic episode. She gives off a different smell than normal a few days before it happens. This is actually the weirdest thing. And call me crazy if you'd like. I went to a fair one time. For some reason my friends weren't with me, can't recall why. I noticed there were surprisingly few people there, and an abnormal amount of clowns. Didn't think anything of it. Got on some ride. Got one of those spiral cut potatoes. Took off after. Went home, went to sleep. Next morning my friend calls me and says where I was last night because my group of friends had a hangout and no one could get a hold of me, nor did I reply. Told them I went to the fair. He asked what fair. Then I couldn't remember where it was. I just said the fair in town. He just laughed and said something to the extent of yeah whatever. Still have no idea where the fuck I went that night. How old were you? Sounds dreamlike, but I feel like you have reason to believe you definitely didn't dream it. 17. And I wasn't a drug user in any way. I totally remember going to it. I'm still certain it was real. Hell if I will ever know though. I had a memory of going to Mexico with my friends and wife. I remember where we went, what we ordered, talked about, everything. But nobody else remembered it and assured me that we've never been to Mexico together. Turned out I watched a cooking show late at night when I had a cold and somehow lodged it into my mind as my own memory. Once I re-watched the episode, it all came back to me. So, maybe something like that? It definitely sounds more dreamlike and hallucinogenic. Sound like you had close to a lucid dream that night. Which would explain more than it doesn't. The clowns. Lack of anybody else with you. The fact you couldn't remember where the fair was. There's no way that wasn't a dream. They couldn't get a hold of you cause you were sleeping. I heard the word impossible whispered into my ear one night when visiting my parents. I had just turned off lights to go to sleep, but wasn't tired or delirious. No TV or devices were on and it was point blank range into my ear. No explanation and hasn't happened since. I've had that happen before. I sort of chalk it up to my brain being sort of dreaming without being asleep just yet, but if you weren't tired I don't think that'd be logical still, though my money is on your brain fritzing a little. For at least 15 years now I will occasionally, maybe 2 or 3 times a month, mistakenly think I see someone I know when walking around. Then, within the next few minutes I will actually see that person. It's frequent enough that I call it now. I'll be like, is that John? Nope, not John. But I bet I'll see him in the next 10 minutes. And then I do. I don't read into it at all. It's just an odd little quirk in my life. When I worked in retail, we used to have a semi-regular customer who looked a bit like Hugh Jackman. Then one day, Hugh Jackman himself came in. It was a busy touristy spot, and it wasn't unusual to have celebrities come in once in a while. Except I didn't realize it was Hugh Jackman because I was so used to seeing his doppelganger. I even chatted with him briefly and commented that it had been a while since he last came in, which earned me a confused look. When he left, my co-workers told me who I had really been talking to. I should have known, since he had an Australian accent and was taller than his look-alike. This must have been pretty neat for Hugh Jackman though, just being talked to like some rando and even being confused for someone else. You look like an actor that I can't quite place. I am getting sword fighting stunt double from your face. IDKY. Strange. He looks like a bunch of actors. I thought Jason Isaacs right away, which is probably why he has this issue. I've had multiple people across multiple geographical areas accidentally refer to me as Scott. My name is not Scott, nor has it ever been. I've never been mistaken for a different name. When I had longer hair, 10 years ago, I had a doppelganger at work. I cut my hair, and now I have a completely different doppelganger at work. I like to think I'm the original, though. Mike McCall in Dropkick Murphys, Street Dogs, once thought I was a guy he went to high school with. I've never been to Boston, and I'm 10 years younger than he is. I guess that one's not so flattering for me. You do look familiar, but you kind of look like the average middle-aged white guy to me, who happens to be a friend of a friend. Almost like the actor Toby Stephens from the new Lost in Space Black Sails. I have the same thing sometimes. When I was younger, I'd guess which color sweater Mr. Rogers all put on all the time. Years later, out of all the Simpsons or Rugrats episodes that existed, I could guess which episode it'd be before it came on 2011. I was walking down my street in Boston and thought, I wonder where Adam Sandler has been. I look up and there's Adam Sandler walking toward me with his kids. Shit was wild. I just said, hey Adam, what's up? He just said, how ya doing buddy? So I went across from my apartment to get pizza thinking, I wonder if I'll see him around again. I come out after lunch and there he is walking back toward me. I didn't ask for a picture because he was with his kids. I just gawked at him like a moron as he passed me again. Nowadays I'll be thinking about somebody and they'll text me in that instance. Weird stuff. Oh man, you just brought back memories. I used to watch The Simpsons every night at 7 p.m. Anytime I thought about a particular episode during the day, 9 times out of 10 that episode would be on that night. Weird. Some old lady at the mall asked if I was Drake from Drake and Josh. I said no and went to a Cracker Barrel across town later that night. She walked in and made awkward eye contact with me throughout my meal. Had a lady ask for change one time with a heavy Asian accent. Told her I didn't have any. She came back around 5 minutes later asking the same thing. I can tell it's like she never seen me before or even asked that. I found that odd for so long and remembered that, and a year or so later, I'm telling my friend this odd story at a fast food place, and as soon as I finished, that same lady appeared asking for change in the exact same way. This fast food place was far away from where I first seen her. My whole body went stunned and my friend in front couldn't even believe it. She ordered food, and of all the empty tables, she decides to sit on the table closest to ours and stare at me while eating. My friend laughed in disbelief. I cannot even comprehend the coincidence of this happening the way that it did. I once had this dream. I woke up, did my normal stuff, then walked into the bathroom. I knew that something was off and that this was a dream, but I followed through. I look in the bathroom mirror, And the most terrifying thing is in my reflection. I scream and wake up. It is now dark outside. I go to my bathroom to wake up and splash some water on my face. Hesitantly look in the mirror. Same thing happens. I wake up again, refusing to look in my mirror. It felt like hours. I waited for the dream to end. I eventually went into the bathroom, looked in the mirror. Same terrifying reflection. I wake up again, walk past bathroom, go talk to mother. Everything in my house was fucked. It was all very dark. Standing alone in kitchen. I am terrified. None of this feels like a dream at all. I wake up, do my normal thing. Don't look in mirror. Go to school. Everything is normal. I go to bed. Wake up. I finally actually wake up. I dreamt an entire school day. I ask everyone about if any of the shit I remember happening actually happened. It didn't. I still am waiting to look in the mirror and wake up in my bed again just to repeat the hell that experience was. This is the scariest one on here. What did you see in the mirror exactly? I don't know. I don't specifically remember what it was, but I was horrified by it. I felt all of the feelings of horror. I was frozen in the terror of it. It wasn't what was in the mirror that actually terrified me. It was the feeling of fear that I had. Okay. Fuck this. I shit you not, dude. I looked in the mirror 10 minutes ago before editing this reply and felt extreme terror for no apparent reason. Edit. To clarify, this has never happened to me before in my entire life until just now. I remember in elementary school I looked up how to lucid dream, and it basically said to try to hold perfectly still and not fall asleep for 30 minutes, which sounded like too much effort to me. One thing I do remember from the tutorial was that it specifically mentioned not looking in mirrors. I had a friend who I would always talk about drugs with, even though neither of us had ever done anything because we were like 11. I figured lucid dreaming would be right up his alley, so I told him about how to do it, complete with the warning to not look in mirrors. One day he decided to do it, and apparently he got it to work. Of course the first thing he did was look in a mirror. His description was very similar to yours. The most intense fear he ever felt, but couldn't remember what he saw. Some 4 or 5 years later I'm in high school and I'll read another tutorial saying if you are in a dimly lit room with the light source behind you, if you stare unblinking into the mirror your reflection would change. My grandma had gotten me a pretty useless low-lume lantern, so I figured I'd give it a whirl. It worked. I saw my face contort into something like that of a werewolf, but I quickly blinked because I wasn't expecting something so convincing. There must be something in the human subconscious that doesn't vibe well with mirrors. The most intense fear he ever felt, but couldn't remember what he saw. The problem with mirrors in dreams is expectation and anxiety. Your rational brain has an expectation of seeing your reflection when you look into a mirror. The problem here is that your brain is also really shitty at reconstructing your own face. So when dream you looks into the mirror, your left brain basically freaks the fuck out trying to reconstruct dream you. Your right brain then freaks the fuck out trying to cope with not having a reflection, deformed reflection, monster reflection. This translates into terror. The best result you'll get is that your brain reconstructs someone else completely and then you become that person for the rest of the dream. False awakening. Wikipedia web page. I get this all the time. Apparently mirrors are a common way to tell that you're dreaming because they're super fucked up in dreams. I usually realize I'm dreaming when I try to turn on a light and it doesn't work, though. That's when it usually turns into a nightmare. There's something in the darkness and it's after me. My ears start ringing and it keeps getting louder and louder. My whole body starts to tingle and I get this sensation that I can only explain as feeling like my soul is being ripped out of my body, like I'm moving in opposing directions at the same time. And then I wake up drenched in sweat. And I hope that I'm really awake. But sometimes the whole process starts over. Oh god, I had this before a very important final. I woke up. My clock's at 10:30. I had to be at school at like 7 to take the exam. So I was freaking out thinking I've overslept. Then I wake up. It's 7 o'clock. I'm still freaking out because I really need to take that final. Then I wake up again. Clock says something like 4 o'clock and I go back to sleep for a bit. Sometimes I still wonder if I'm gonna wake up soon and still have to take the final. This was about 5 years ago. I've had one false awakening when I was practicing lucid dreaming, and while nothing scary happened in it and I knew what it was, I was still terrified. I can't imagine more than one level or one with actual shit going down. I was driving home one night, a little under a year ago, and the sky turned completely white for about 8 seconds. Mind you, it was completely clear. No clouds or any kind of moisture in the atmosphere or anything. And it wasn't just one spot either. It was the same. Uniform stark white everywhere from every direction up to the horizon. But besides the sky, nothing else had changed. Everything else on the ground was the same exact shade, coloring and shadowing as it had before. It was as if someone had inverted the colors of the sky and only the sky. Then it just changed back. It didn't dim or fade. It just switched to black. Still fucks me up and actually made me go see a neurologist. He said everything was fine. No signs of a stroke or aneurysm or anything. Edit. U/00 Dawn explained it perfectly. It was like looking at a night painting that hadn't had the sky painted in yet. Edit 2. The high altitude meteor hypothesis is sounding more and more believable. Sounds like a meteor burning up happened around my place a few months ago, and it looks exactly like a lightning strike but longer duration. But it wasn't like light coming from a source, cause nothing on the ground or in the horizon was lit up. It was like the sky was a digital screen that just got turned on. This is actually perfectly explainable. If the meteor was over the horizon, then everything on the ground would out of direct line of sight from the meteor, and therefore would not be lit up by the meteor. But from high in the sky the meteor would be in direct line of sight, hence the sky lit up. I'd like to be an eyewitness to this theory. I had an experience very similar. I was in college and my buddy and I were smoking up in his car in a parking lot. What the OP posted is exactly what I experienced. Fortunately my buddy was there to verify that actually happened. We were stoned as hell and freaking the fuck out. Next day in the news everyone was talking about a meteor that actually went through someone's roof. It was the exact time we saw this. It was an incredible experience. I've actually witnessed 2 other meteors entering the atmosphere. The other 2 almost looked like super fast airplanes on fire. Amazing to see, but explainable right away. The first one is exactly as the OP describes though. It was wild, and the craziest experience I've ever had while baked. I still can't picture this. You mean to say that it was still night on the ground and the sky was white, but no light was emanating from the sky or illuminating any of the objects on the ground? I can't wrap my head around what that even looks like. His brain's graphics card briefly read the wrong texture on the skybox. Glitch self-corrected after a short time. Probably something like nighttime painting. But the painter hasn't started painting the sky yet. It's most likely a meteor burning up. Everything gets so bright that it's pretty much daylight for a few seconds. and the brightness being brighter than your brain can process makes it just appear as one color with no source. That happened to me once too, around 3 AM. That's even about the same duration. I thought it must be some kind of aerial explosion nearby because there was a marine base nearby, but there wasn't any sound and nobody else seemed to have noticed anything the next day. Freak brain occurrence is my best guess too. Something similar happened to me. It was like 11 PM and suddenly all the lights and electronics in my room turned on and then the lights started glowing super bright. Even the street lights started glowing brighter than usual, then bam. Few seconds later, everything went dark. Then, the whole sky turned bright green, largely emanating from the electrical substation like 1 kilometer away. It looked like a bright green explosion but totally silent, and the sky stayed green for a few seconds. I thought it was terrifying at the time, but years later I think it must have just been some sort of transformer explosion at the substation. When the transformers on power lines blow up, they are typically green. You should look up a video of one going off and see if it's familiar. That could explain the flux in AC current. This also happened to me for about the same duration. I was wondering why everything on the ground was normal but just the sky's colors inverted, and I was like, this is it, abduction time. Then I didn't get abducted. Then I was angry I didn't get abducted. The last part may or may not be true. Good about seeing a doctor. I've read on similar posts on AskReddit where it was explained that sudden changes in perception can be due to effects of migraines. When I was a child, I saw what looked like a golf ball of neon blue light pass in the night sky from my bedroom. It must have been the size of the moon. There was no real tell. I can still recall the trajectory each time I look out of the window. It is a crystal clear memory. I know I wasn't dreaming, because I called my parents into my room immediately. They still remember it to this day. The memory is so concrete in my mind. It is unlike any other childhood memory, and I was just 5 or so. I am certain there is some barely interesting explanation for my experience, but it is almost more interesting to me when left a mystery. Okay, here is a story I posted previously. Once long ago, my family was in the front of the house, living room and kitchen, while I was in the back of the house, my bedroom. I went to the bathroom real quick, which was in between both my room and the front of the house, and was in there no longer than 60 seconds. By that time all the furniture in room had been rearranged, and I mean completely moved from one end of the room to the other. Now, this included a bed, my grandmother's old recliner, and a heavy wooden desk and some other odds and ends. Now the part that really makes it unexplainable was the fact that the recliner was blocking the only entrance into my room, and everyone was still in the front of the house. Not to crazy since I don't really remember feeling scared, but man was it the weirdest. This is more WTF than scary strange. My wife was making spaghetti and needed sausage for the sauce. Me and my son go to the local grocery store to buy it. Now there are 2 stores in my little town. One is a nice new chain with overinflated prices and the other looks like something from the 70s. Dirty floors, bad lighting, and poor selections. It's depressing and a little creepy. But this is where we go. There is hardly anyone there, as always, and we head straight to the meat cooler in the back of the store. They don't have what my wife wanted, but there is a red button to call the butcher. I pushed the button and waited. At first, nothing happened. Then over the intercom we hear, "Mrs. Sausage, please come to the front. Mrs. Sausage to the front." My son starts laughing and asked if they are calling me Miss Sausage. I was equal parts amused and irritated. I'm a man, by the way. Then a door near the meat department swings open and out comes the manager. I've seen him before and he, just like this store, looks like something from the 70s. Brushed back hair, big mustache, 3 buttons on his shirt unbuttoned, gold chain, think of a redneck John Travolta. He walks to about 10 feet from us, stops, points at me and starts laughing. Then a customer comes from an aisle pushing a buggy and they both start laughing together and pointing. They were looking at each other and then back at me and my son, laughing and laughing. It was weird to say the least. We just walked away and drove to the other store. I'd been wandering around St. Augustine late at night with a few friends, and could have sworn I saw a dog ahead of us. It was still there, but they couldn't see it. About as big as a Great Dane. And the coat was dark, but seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. It took off and they still didn't notice it. I've never had a history of hallucinations, nor have I used any substance beyond tobacco, and I didn't smoke yet back then. The weirdest part is a few weeks later, same area, different group, I saw it again, and again. They didn't see it, except this time, it was a small pack, probably about 4. Something felt really off though, like I was being watched by something malicious. Haven't seen it since that night, but whenever I go down St. George Street under a full moon, even on crowded nights, something just feels seriously wrong. Have you ever been to a county fair? Have you ever seen the trashy trailer park looking dudes with the bombshell girlfriends? I can't explain that. I see at least like 3 every time I go to one. Got a redneck friend 5/10 with a 9/10 GF. I know exactly how it happens. Country girls typically date country guys. This narrows the pool. Next they look for fun. This narrows it down again. To be fun you typically need money. This narrows it down again. Thus my tooth missing. Crooked nose, drooped eyes. 5'5" buddy with his 40k mechanic income in a town of 20k pullers. Driving a modded out truck. Owns a small boat. 4 advs. 2 dirt bikes. And just fixed up a Harley, was able to get himself a girl way out of his league. Ava Gardner would later add to the legend, when asked why someone of her beauty would want Sinatra, a 119-pound weakling. He may weigh only 119 pounds. She shot back at the reporter, but 19 pounds of it is cock. When I was in high school I worked at the Home Depot as a summer job, and my co-worker and I used to sit at the paint desk when it was slow and people watch. We would see these types of guys walk through with their incredibly hot girlfriends, and try to explain why they were together. One day we saw this guy walking down the front of the store, and he was with an incredibly hot girl. He had long, wet, oily hair down to his shoulders, a beer belly, and an old hoodie semi-tucked into cargo shorts. White socks over tan sandals brought the whole outfit together. As they walked by, my co-worker just looks at me, then at him, and goes, "Huge dick." I swear to God that this guy must have heard us, because as they walked by he glanced over with a grin as if he were saying, "Yeah, you know it." I once went to Panera with some friends. We got our food and sat down at the table. About halfway through the meal my friend says, "Did any of you guys notice that pole before?" I look next to the table and there is a huge floor to ceiling black pole literally almost touching me. I swear it was not there when we sat down, and at this point I'm freaking out and saying we're in an alternate universe. I get the attention of a woman who works at the Panera and ask her if she's noticed the pole before, and she looks at it genuinely baffled and says she hasn't. Went back a few weeks later and I swear to God it wasn't there. Still one of the most bizarre things that's ever happened to me. This is the weirdest one in here lol. Ghosts and stuff are scary, But things like this that really challenge the accuracy of your perception really freak me out. Probably just a support beam from a parallel universe that poked through into our universe for a bit. This is by far the one that has freaked me out the most of these stories. So strange. Panera are weird. Mine is haunted and I've had multiple people experiencing the same thing. Had things happening at my apartment. Doorknobs rattling noisily and doors shutting that have absolutely no logical explanation. Was at work doing dishes and while the prepper was weighing out meat a funnel just hops off the wire racks and falls down. Not really that weird until we checked the cameras. It was slightly obscured by a box, but the only way for it to have fallen was to smashed up against the back of the shelves and shoved under the side rail because we couldn't make it fit any other way. Like physically force it. And the shelf is so high up it couldn't have been stacked on anything. Sitting there doing some cleaning during downtime and the mid-shift person and I are looking down the line and a cup just falls off a shelf. Look on the cameras later and it's being blocked by one of the order screens. But you just see it come sliding from behind the screen and off the shelf. The little to-go bowls you get large macs and the broth bowls and have come off the shelves. I had a singular one fall off the stack and hit me on top of the head. No cameras on it this time. But the way they are stacked there's no physical way for it to come off unless it was lifted and pushed. Weird shit fam. Not a thread to read when one takes a summer job on a horse ranch in the middle of nowhere. Living in a cabin with no one for miles. Edit. I didn't realize I'd get this much attention but common questions are as follows. 1. I am in TN2. Unsure if they will hire at the end of summer. I've known them going on 20 years. I may permanently take a job here if it works out. 3. The best way to get a job like this is to start looking in local ads for the need for a barn hand to feed or muck stalls. Work your way up. 4. I love all your helpful and creepy comments. Sometimes helpfully creepy and often creepily helpful. Keep in mind that most small-time and family-owned farms ranches are really particular about who they let care for their animals. It takes a lot of trust. If I missed anyone's question, I'm sorry. It's been a long day and I gotta go clear a field now. A woman I worked with had a cousin that lived at a ranch taking care of horses and all that, and one day he disappeared. Turns out the woman that owned the property had this habit of hiring men, killing them, and then burning their bodies. Sheila La Barry, Wikipedia webpage. This is what I love about Reddit. There is always someone out here able to show love when you need it the most. That's awful. I'm sorry about your co-worker's cousin. Maybe I'll be okay because I'm a woman, and the people who own the ranch take in retired horses. But if I find any bodies on their property I'm out of here. You'd be fine if you were on that man killing ranch, but sadly you're on that woman killing one. I know it's hard to keep track of which ranches kill what. You know someone should make an atlas to help keep track. But I do wish you the best of luck. Stay sunny. Living in a cabin with no one for miles. Maybe there is someone. If I've learned anything, it's the animals to be worried about, not random shit. You'll be fine, buddy. My ex-boyfriend and I were in Idaho vacationing with his parents and grandparents on a lake lot that they rent every summer. We were sleeping in bed and I woke up freaking out because I saw an old lady wearing what appeared to be a blue nightgown. When I quickly went to put my glasses on, the figure disappeared. The next morning. Keep in mind our first interaction with the family was at this point. His grandma asked, was anyone in my room last night who has a blue nightgown? Let's just say I didn't sleep in that room for the remainder of the trip. Edit. You're all fun. Thanks for all of your comments and helping me solve my mystery. D. Edit. Y'all are insane. Lol. Edit. I don't know why I added a parenthesis around ex-boyfriend, but I'm keeping it cause it gives my post flavor. Plot twist. The grandma was the blue nightgown woman and was watching you sleep but got caught. Went for an elaborate cover story. When I was around 6 or 7, I was waiting in line for a game at a neighborhood party. This young boy about my age walked up to me, handed me a green Power Ranger action figure, and said I'm sorry, then walked off. I still to this day have no idea what that was about, and I still have the action figure. It's pretty cool. You push a button on his back and his head flips around so he's no longer wearing a mask. Maybe he stole it from someone that looks like you, then felt bad and thought he was giving it back. One day I was riding on my school bus on the way to school. At some point I felt sick to my stomach, not like I needed to puke but more like you just found out something bad. So I closed my eyes and saw like a black background and then my older cousin and a handgun I had never seen before, all in flashes. Then I heard 3 loud gunshots and I opened my eyes. Through all this I could feel disparity, anger, and fear. My father picked me up from school early that day, something we had already planned, and when I got in the car I asked him where did they find him. He was surprised I knew. My cousin committed suicide earlier that morning, and before he did he shot his radio before shooting himself. Were you close with your cousin? Have you experienced anything like this before or since? We had been closer in the last few years of life, but we were raised states apart before he moved near. I have had a few things like it in the past, yes, nothing quite as strong though. For the first few years of life my parents and I slept in a car or couch to couch. My mom tells me of a time we were supposed to be sleeping in this one room of a family friend, but every time we went into that room I would cry. It didn't matter if I was dead asleep, I would wake up and cry. So, my parents didn't want me to disturb the family, so they decided to sleep in the car. That night the roof caved in and most of the damage was on the bed area. When I was 10 or 11 I had a horrible and very realistic dream that I was being chased by these little demon troll-like creatures around my house. At the end of my dream I ran into the bathroom, but before I shut the door one of the demons scratched from the bottom of my neck to my tailbone. I woke up in the hallway outside of the bathroom with 3 distinct claw marks across my back. I still don't know what it was or what really happened. Dude, I woke up to hallucinations of little troll demon thingies. 4. Coming towards me too once. My aunt was sleeping along with me in the living room and I screamed and she woke up. I was freaking out but she didn't see them. Then they just went away. As a child I had an entity lay down next to me. In my bunk bed. I felt the space next to me depress and there was nothing there. I could feel movement as if they were shifting to get comfortable, but there was nothing there. Well, no one will see this, but this community center I worked for was on the edge of an old cemetery. There was a big tree that people like to say people were hung from, but I don't believe that. The area is well known for Civil War activity, so I wouldn't be surprised if the area the building sat on had seen its share of death. Anyways, I don't believe in ghosts, but one night after closing up and doing a walk to make sure the building was empty, locking all the doors, etc., we were setting the motion detector alarm when we heard 2 young girls giggling down the hallway. Me, my supervisor, and my co-worker all looked at each other, looked down the hallway, and back at each other. Supervisor said, anyone want to check on that? We both said nope. Set the alarm and left. One of the janitors one time came running up to the front desk after close and begged us to stay and leave with her. She swore up and down that while she was cleaning a woman screamed in her ear. She since that refused to go down a certain hallway once the building was closed. One supervisor said she'd often see a guy in an old suit and tall hat sitting in the chairs by the admin offices when she was doing rounds. A co-worker who didn't believe in ghosts either said he saw a guy that fit that description in a reflection of the door window in that same wing after close. Like I said, I don't believe in ghosts and I'd like to keep it that way, so after the laughing kids I refused to leave the front after we closed. Every once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, I have a dream where my entire life plays out in front of me. But not just from birth until now, but from birth until old age death. The weird part is in my dream there is no concept of time. It's like I drift off to a different dimension when I sleep. I will see my dad go from a young man when I was born to a middle-aged guy now in the blink of an eye. But I am able to process the entire lifetime of experiences with him almost immediately. I feel every happy, sad, scared, excited emotion I have ever experienced all at once. In my dream it's like all of this takes place in 2-3 real seconds. But it's as though I am experiencing an entire lifetime in those few seconds. I drift into this dream and immediately I start spinning like a marble around a drain. The whole time I am spinning I am watching my life play out in nanoseconds. I know I am being a bit redundant, but I don't know how to explain it. I am not a spiritual or religious person, but these dreams are the few times that have given me pause. I can't really explain a reality dimension that doesn't truly exist in our tangible world, but what I experienced was so real I have never been able to shake it. My life condensed down like that gives me a different emotion and knowledge I have never had before. And right when it's all starting to make sense and there is a big reveal to why we exist, I get hit with intense anxiety and wake up. Like my body is not able to comprehend the reality. It's just strange. A few weeks after my husband passed away, I was cleaning his clothes out of our bedroom. I moved a pile of shirts. He was messy, and I found a folded up piece of paper with my name written on it. He used to leave me little notes all over the house. Not wanting to get upset, I put it on my dresser and kept cleaning. The next morning my best friend called me and said she saw him in a dream, and he asked her if she would tell me to read the note. I hadn't told a soul about it. I opened it up and it was a goodbye note, specifically for me to read after he was gone. I should add that his death was sudden and absolutely not a suicide. It was the summer of 1992 and I was 17 years old. My friends and I decided to play volleyball at Kings Park Southside Beach in Sheboygan, WI. We had been playing volleyball for about an hour when we decided to take a short break and catch our breath. At this time a man in a rolled ragged suit and trench coat entered our view walking from the west going down Clara Avenue east towards the beach and Lake Michigan. There wasn't anything overly unusual about the man besides how hot he must have been wearing that suit and long coat on this hot summer day. Or at least so we thought. This is where things get completely crazy. This man in the ragged suit and coat never broke his stride for a single moment. He walked at full speed, even pace, off the sidewalk of Clara Ave, over a sand dune and grass berm area, across the sandy beach, and straight into the water. The water barely seemed to slow him down. We watched in amazement as the man stepped, and stepped. The water first up to his knees, then his waist, next his chest, and finally, I shit you not, his head. He didn't bob up or down as a normal buoyant human would. He didn't really even slow down as most of us do when being impeded by a wall of water. He simply marched into Lake Michigan, never to be seen again. My friends and I were more or less shocked and amused for the first 1 to 3 minutes, expecting the man to come rocketing to the surface for air at any moment. Nothing. No wet man's head. No bubbles or froth in the water. Nothing. Around 4 minutes in we paused our declarations of what the fuck was that and what the fuck is going on. Is that man okay? And sprinted to the area we had last seen him. Nothing. Lake Michigan off the coast of Sheboygan is never really clear and visibility stops around about a foot down. We didn't know what to do. Do we jump in and wade around for the guy? Do we call the police or Coast Guard? Had we even really seen what we thought we'd just seen? None of my friends or I were the type to attribute almost anything to the supernatural. Most of us generally being atheists and pragmatists back then, as we still are today. Even now I simply have no explanation for what we saw that day. We scanned up and down the coastline for a man with some kind of scuba tank to come walking out of the water. Or even worse, a body floating. Nothing. No clothes. No handkerchiefs. No shoes. Friends who were there on the beach that day still bring it up once in a while during get-togethers. My personal favorite theory: the reality we all share is some kind of simulation. Probably an ancestor sim. That's the best I can come up with. Or the man had rocks in his pockets and did not become buoyant due to the excess weight. You may have witnessed a very successful suicide. Sounds like you witnessed a rather determined suicide. Those coats have lots of pockets to fill with rocks, and it would explain why he never came back up. Okay, I finally have a good one. This was about 7 years ago. I was around 17 and had just got my license and was driving back from church on a sunny Sunday afternoon with my 11-year-old brother in the passenger seat. It was still very light out. We were on a highway. Small town. But the busiest road in it. Right as it crossed into some residential areas, so the speed limit was dropping. I looked to the right, already slowing down to see what the speed limit was, as I was a new driver. For some reason, as I looked at the sign, a couple of girls knocking on the front door of a small white house only about 50 feet behind the sign caught my eye. They looked to be in their mid-teens. I couldn't see their faces, but they had brown skin and long, thick, dark, curly brown hair almost to waist level in normal looking clothes. The house sits at an angle on the street, so I couldn't see into the door frame. I just saw that it opened. As soon as it opened, the hair on the heads of both of these girls shot straight up into the air, as if they were flipped upside down, and so one was shaking them back and forth. I only caught a glimpse for a couple of seconds, but I had the wherewithal to shout to my brother to look. He looked over and we both started laughing hysterically at how bizarre it was. I'm so glad I did that, because if not, I honestly am not sure if I'd still believe I saw what I did. It wasn't till the next day when we realized it was actually creepy. Their hair appeared so thick that the only thing I could imagine having done that would be a mega strong giant fan under the porch that turned on as soon as the door opened, which of course makes no sense. It was not a windy day and isn't a windy part of Washington. I don't live at home anymore, but every time I visit my parents, I wonder about that house and tell myself to go and knock on that door and ask whoever is in there about what I saw. Got a family now, so probably never will. I grew up in a town that had a haunted railroad bridge. It was a common hangout place, and one day one thing led to another and I ended up getting hit by a train. When I came to, there was a girl who helped me up and called my friends over to call an ambulance and walk me to the street. Everyone there that day swears up and down that there were only 3 of us there, all guys, and no girl helped me up. To increase the weird factor, I still see this girl when I half wake up, sleep paralysis states, or I'm waiting to fall asleep after taking sleeping pills. I've learned to accept her as some sort of unexplained head trauma hallucination. She's cool though. We can have two-way conversations and sometimes she gives me good insights, which I assume are just things I've already figured out in my subconscious somewhere. You got hit by a train, survived, and I'm the first one to question that? Right? Yeah, basically there were a bunch of narrow, square train cars and I was standing close to the train cause I was a dumb teenager, and then a wider, round oil car came and wanged me on the head chest. According to my friends it tossed me like 10 feet, but I think that was an exaggeration. My buddy drives a train and hit a girl once and said she flew pretty far, so it may not be an exaggeration. She was walking on the tracks listening to music with earbuds in and he slowed down as much as he could, while blaring the horn. But he said he clipped her at a pretty good speed though. Shoes came off and everything, but she was fine. When he got out to check on her, the first thing she said was, "I have to call my boss and tell him I'll be late." Yeah, same thing happened to a childhood friend of mine, except she didn't survive. Supposedly body parts were found 25 m away. I read that as 25 miles away and thought the conductor was an ass for not stopping. Fucking freedom units. You got really lucky that day, dude. Kids, do not fuck around on railroads or at crossings. This is kind of a wholesome one. I think I'll close the thread and go to sleep now. One day one thing led to another and I ended up getting hit by a train. Go on. My grandmother had all sorts of cancer. We were told she didn't have long to live, so me and my dad visited her in hospital. Upon our arrival we entered the room in which she was sleeping. There was an old man in a long white robe sitting on a chair next to her with his palm on her forehead. We stayed for 10 minutes in silence before we had to leave. On the journey home I asked my dad who was the man sitting in the chair. My dad replied, "It was just me and you in the room." The next day we took a trip back down to see her and she was awake. I explained what had happened and she said that I had seen her spirit guide and I wasn't supposed to be able to see him. She described him exactly as I had seen. She died a few days later and it still creeps me out to this day, as this spirit guide was as clear as day, not see-through, not a white sheet. He was there 100%. One night way up in the mountain of British Columbia, I was camped with some friends on a rock outcropping. We were sitting around talking when all of a sudden a big bright light came shooting in. Then it suddenly shot off in a different direction. It was pretty far out, and I would have thought it was a meteor if it hadn't changed direction so suddenly. Most people had their backs to it, but one other person did see it. When I was 7 years old, I was passing by the basement bathroom when I saw a stereotypical leprechaun and said bathroom. I had turned around and charged in there, apparently going to PvP the little shit for his gold or something, but when I enter the bathroom, he wasn't there anymore. Note, he didn't disappear while I was looking at him, but I had passed the bathroom fully before I realized I saw a leprechaun and rushed back in. I was a little bummed that I didn't get to fight a leprechaun, and I never saw anything like that again in that house or the one I live in now. At 27 years old I was lying in bed, alone in my apartment. I had not been drinking or taken any drugs. I gently woke up to a feeling of complete and utter love, of being loved so incredibly deeply it simply cannot be described. People who have NDEs describe the mind-blowing love that they feel. It is not possible to describe how loved we are. I remember thinking, I had no idea, but I wasn't thinking it to myself. I was saying it to the thing that was loving me. If the best you have ever felt loved or pleasure could be said to be one grain of sand, this was more than all the beaches in the world. I also felt like I knew everything. It was imparted to me. We are all safe. Everything is as it should be. And everything is fine. It was a wonderful experience. Half a lifetime ago now. When I walk under street lights, once in a while they will shut off. It's been happening all my life. It is my secret superpower. Holy shit, me too. Even when I drive under them. This happened so much that I remember thinking it was odd as a little kid. I convinced myself at that time that I had some sort of mutant electrical powers that caused the lights to shut down. I read a lot of comic books. Nowadays I'll see one coming up and think no fucking way, and then boom, it goes out right when I pass under it. There's at least 3 other people in this thread that have said the same thing. I wonder what causes it. I visited a daycare to pick up a niece. I see a little girl about 5 reading one of those thick cardboard page kiddie books where every page is a letter. She stops what she's doing and tells me, "Everybody's life is a book." I smile, and one of those dumb cute things you tell little girls to be nice. I don't even remember what. She deadass looks me right in the eye and says, "I read your book. It got real sad. Be nice to people before you can't." And then she puts the book down and walks away. 2 different experiences. First one was about 20 years ago. We were smoking out in my friend's place in San Francisco before we went out to play pool. She and I had exchanged spooky stories before, but this threw me. I was walking out of her place at the back of the group and I saw something in the mirrored walls in her lobby. At first I thought there was something in my eye, but no. It was a ball of fog at about the height of my head between me and the mirror. I stepped towards the mirror to see what the hell was going on. As I did, my face felt like I stuck it through an ice cold mist that was the density of something thicker than air and very cold. I immediately drew my face back and had a distinct impression of an older woman. What was really weird about it was how not spooky and mundane it was. It felt like I just bumped into something or someone very matter-of-factly. I know we were smoking out, but have you ever walked into a ghost when you were high? I've been much higher but never experienced anything like that. I told her about it later and she said she knows her place was haunted and really wished I wouldn't bring it up. Second experience, I was following my daughter and her instructor on a trail through a forest. They were on horses and I was walking with my camera taking pictures. I come out of the forest right behind them and they're laughing and a little ticked. They said they'd been waiting almost 10 minutes for me. But as I said, I was walking right behind them. I have pictures and the color of the pics is unusually vivid right beforehand, but other than that there's nothing to see. I somehow just lost 10 minutes of time. I had a similar experience to your losing time. When I was a teenager, my very religious family was standing in a circle holding hands getting ready to pray before our meal. Then without praying everyone left the group. I was confused. "Aren't we going to pray?" They all looked at me like I was crazy. We did. I have zero recollection and no apparent gap in the events in my memory. It didn't happen for me. For them it did. Best way to explain it. Lol. My sister once played a song on Guitar Hero, then immediately the same song afterwards. She didn't believe when I told her. To this day. Once when I was laying on my mom's couch in the living room just as I was falling asleep, I realized I couldn't see the fixture stuff in the living room and my mind was like, what am I looking at? I tried to focus my vision and realized I was looking into a close-up of an eye, as if someone was standing so close to me with their eyes wide open that all I could see was eye. I bolted upright, and there was nothing but an empty room. I'm sure it's just because I was drifting between sleep and wakefulness, but that image haunted me for a while. In this university I used to go to, we have extracurricular activities wherein sometimes we're required to sleep over in the campus to catch up on some deadlines for an event. So around 12 midnight, people started going to sleep while I pretended to go to sleep, because I do not want to be up all night chatting with friends, like what the rest usually do. About around an hour after, I overheard friends talking about going to the nearby bakery, it's open 24 hours a day, to grab some midnight snacks. I didn't bother joining them. but somehow my insomnia kicked in and I just couldn't sleep no matter how tired I was. So then I decided to join them, but I was already left behind. I went out alone and it was really dark with barely street lights on. At the end of the block, I had to take a turn to dark alley because that's the only path leading to the bakery. There was this strange humanoid figure with big bat-like wings just swaying in the wind, real life Batman, on top of the building right in front of me. Right when I was directly under it, a strong gust of wind blew towards me vertically from above. It was kind of like screeching this quack-quack sound. For the first time, and maybe last time, in my life, I felt this cold rush of fear in my spine, like my entire body was screaming run like hell. I panicked and ran as fast as I could. When I caught up to my friends in the bakery, they asked me why do I look I saw hell or something. Thinking that no one would believe me anyway, I just said that nothing happened. After that, one of them brought up that they heard this quack-quack screeching sound coming from this dark building. I didn't tell them that I saw it though. That was about 8 years ago. Sometime after that, I would hear similar stories from other students describing the same thing. My 3-year-old nephew walked by my room while I was playing computer. Definitely noticed it out of the corner of my eye. My sister was in the bathroom getting ready using the mirror. She called out his name, and then walked into my room and asked if I saw him. I said yes, then remembered he was with our parents. We went into the room. We both saw a small humanoid walk into and noticed the balcony door wide open. We lived on the 18th floor and never used the private balcony. We both pretty much agreed to pretend it didn't happen. Typing this gave me the goosebumps. I'd normally chalk it off as just my eyes playing tricks on me, but I turned my head as I saw it walk by, and my sister clearly heard it walk by her, enough to have her think it was her son and call his name. She had thought maybe our parents had come back already, but nope. Just us and whatever the hell that thing was. Actually, as I was typing this, I also remember 2 other things that had happened while we lived there. One night I was sleeping and I heard a really weird sound I can only describe as a ray gun. A sound increasing in frequency and pitch, and sounded a little bubbly, if that makes sense. Right after I heard it, my room lit up with a green light for maybe half a second and then went away, almost as if something had pointed a spotlight right at my window. My sister also told me she saw this one night, and when she looked out the window she saw it at another apartment building maybe 200 m away. By it I mean just a green light shining at an apartment, apparently coming from nothing. Yeah, only weird things to ever happen to me or anyone I know. I don't believe in ghosts. I think aliens are definitely out there but just not here. I have no explanation for what I experienced. A small humanoid. The expression you used made this 200% more terrifying. When I was in high school, I frequented a park in my neighborhood to smoke weed with my friends. I don't live on the bad side of town by any means, but a few sketch things have happened here and there. Mostly my friend getting jumped a few times. Anyways, one night it was about 11 p.m. and just me and my buddy. We were smoking a blunt against the back fence of the park. We were in the dark and out of sight from the parking lot. Out of nowhere we see a dark figure running across the field away from the parking lot, and 2 figures chasing the first figure. Then 2 cars full speed pull into the parking lot and onto the grass. High beams pointed at the field when I saw it was 2 males chasing a black girl, maybe a teenager, all while a big white lady stepped out of one of the cars and yelled, "Get that bitch." My friend started to step forward because he wanted to help, but I held him back because it wasn't safe. We had no idea what was going on, although it certainly looked like a kidnapping. I was scared if they noticed us they would try to come after us too. I finally convinced him to leave with me and we climbed the fence and started making our way down the street. A minute later the same cars drove past us leaving the park and I swear I could hear someone in the backseat yelling. I called the police and told them what happened. But IDK man, I think about that often. This will probably get lost in all these comments, but this is the damnedest thing that I can't explain and it makes me feel crazy to even think about. I make a daily commute that's about 40 minutes. There are two routes I can take. Back roads and the main road. Well, the main road was under construction so I was taking the back roads for a few days to avoid traffic. The day I go back on the main road I am pleasantly surprised to find a rather frustrating section of the road was repaved. This was nice, because they also painted lines showing that the right lane must turn right and the left lane goes straight. I was actually happy about this and remember thinking now I don't have to wait to turn right on red behind someone going straight. The next day I take the back road again. And the day after I take the main road. Except when I get to the part of road in question, it's completely back to normal. Even the old pavement, the old lane lines. I to this day cannot explain it. It can't be possible to have simply reverted the work that was done there within a day. I mean, there was even fresh blacktop. And then, poof, back to normal in 24 hours. Years ago when I was a teenager, I sat up at 2:56 a.m. by the bedside clock, still fast asleep, and screamed at the top of my lungs. This was not normal behavior for me, so my entire family came running to see what's wrong. They had to physically shake me to wake me up. When I was finally conscious, I had no recollection of screaming or why I did so. After a bit of fuss everyone went back to bed. The next morning, my best friend who lived up the street, walked over as she usually did, to ride to school with us in the morning. Sitting at the table, she yawned and said she was tired because she'd had a nightmare the night before. In her dream my sister and I were sitting in a car downtown when shots rang out and a man covered in blood ran out in the street. She woke up at 2:56 a.m. by her bedside clock, when, in her dream, I screamed. We completely freaked out because of what happened the night before. Later that day, my older sister, the third person in the car in my friend's dream, was downtown outside of the courthouse building where she worked, when shots rang out and a man covered in blood ran into the street. He was a jealous ex, who had gone into the hair salon where his former girlfriend and her current boyfriend worked, killed her, and critically wounded the new boyfriend, as he ran into the street at 2:56 p.m. by the courthouse clock. He stabbed himself in the throat, killing himself directly in front of my sister, and my sister screamed. I have dreams about fucking nothing moments. Things like surfing web pages or playing pool. Just little snippets, maybe like 2-second long things. I'll remember them very faintly, but sometimes they actually legit happen. Detail by detail. I just started a new job and they have me working on a website I had never been on before. I open up the website, go to create an account and boom, I had a dream about that exact page layout a month before. The unique font, red patterns and website name, all a perfect match. Freaks me out. Edit. Thanks Reddit for making me feel like I'm not the only person with a crazy, not so superpower. There should be an aftercare subreddit for people who read this shit before bed. When I was around 6 I was walking through my childhood home and thought I saw a woman walk across the kitchen into the garage. Of course me being 6 I followed her to the garage, but when I opened the door the lights were out and the garage was completely full of boxes. I went back into the house to find her and she was in her bedroom on the other side of the house. Much later in my life, my junior year of high school, My brother passed away. He was mentally handicapped and would often need me at night and would often knock on my door to wake me up. I'm a deep sleeper, so he would have to kick on hard. At the beginning of senior year I woke up in the middle of the night, sat straight up, stared into the darkness, and I was met with 3 distinct and loud knocks on my door. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts, but those 2 events have me scratching my head. TL. Dr. Mom, Doppelganger and Ghost Brother. Why can I never stumble across these threads or are paranormal in the middle of the day when I'm just chilling? Nah, it's always at 2 to 4 AM when I'm home alone right before bed. On occasion, I have highly prophetic dreams. I can't influence the subject matter of these dreams and they're usually verifiable within a few weeks. They used to creep me out, but after all these years they're now just mildly amusing to me. I was laying in bed one night with my eyes closed, not sleeping. I opened them up and saw 2 dark, silhouetted, ghost-like figures walking past the edge of my bed. One was like that of a woman, the other like a child following behind her. The freakiest part of it is that I swear they turned and looked right at me as they were passing by. Saw a group of those silent black triangles with lights at the corners flying over a campsite once. Not much of a UFO believer before or afterward. Still haven't heard a satisfactory explanation though. They were silent, large, and moved together in a formation, then spread out and flew off in different directions. Was very unsettling because turned out to be a very common sighting amongst the UFO community. It'll go with some kind of stealth aircrafts being tested by drunk pilots. That's about all I can come up with. Edit. Campsite was in Holland. The orange ball in the sky. I have a good one from when I was a kid. My cousin and I had a sleepover one night out at my cabin on the water. We were upstairs in the loft which overlooked the rest of my cabin. My cabin faces the water and is all glass windows, so the sky, water and ground are all very visible. As we played Smash Bros 64, I looked into the sky and noticed what appeared to be the Sunday, at about 2 AM. But there was no light coming off it. It was a large orange ball and it glowed, far up in the night sky. We reasoned that this must be a reflection, or at the very least, the moon. We ran down the spiral stairs from loft to main floor and to the window. It seemed to have moved to the tree line by then and we noticed the trees in front of the orange ball. Not convinced. I went outside and sure enough it was not a reflection or anything else. It was there. The moon was also in the sky. We ran inside and back up to the loft to play Smash Bros and thought we could ignore what we just saw. Not 5 minutes later, my cousin noticed the sun-sized orange ball was now completely gone from the sky. We ran to my bedroom and slept in there instead that night. No idea what it was. Last year, the 7th of July, driving westbound through Nebraska at about 10 to 11 p.m., about 40 miles away from the Colorado border, it started to rain a little, and there was this funky lightning I've never seen before. It wasn't real lightning so much as it was like flashing multicolored prisms. At first I thought it was just a weird light effect from my window, but we pulled over and got out of the car to watch it. I've never seen anything heard anything like it, and my Google searches don't come up with anything that matches up with what we saw. I came home to a fly suspended in the air by 2 strands of a spider's web, one strand attached to each of the fly's wings. The fly was still alive. Here's a link to my RWTF post about it. I came home last night to a fly suspended in the middle of my kitchen. I'm dealing with a seriously sadistic spider. It was still alive. WTF webpage. When I was about 15, maybe 16 years old, I went to a haunted house for Halloween with some friends. This particular haunted house is very popular throughout the US for being full contact as well as being truly haunted. It was featured in some ghost hunting show also. Actors dressed as doctors walked around outside screwing with people and would also sometimes put a bag over their head and would drag them inside and put them in random spots. I was one of those lucky enough to be kidnapped. I was placed in a room, bag still over my head, and after waiting maybe a minute or two to be sure the doctor left, I took the bag off. Seeing a faint, what I thought was just my brain playing tricks on me, shadow of a little girl. I rubbed my eyes because again I thought I was just hallucinating. My eyes came back to and I could see the figure of the little girl a little more clearly. I freaked out and ran out of the room screaming. Altogether I give Asylum 49 a 9/10. Live in the same area and have always wanted to go to that one. My scare tolerance is a 2/10, but I love the rush. I'll have to check it out. It's really fun. Highly recommended. If you go this year, head over to Sandy and put up a large sign saying Ted Strip 22, meet me at Asylum 49 tonight. This place is great and makes every other haunted house seem bad. Anyway, my dad used to inspect the X-ray film developing equipment, long time ago, all around the state. He said whenever he would go to that hospital, it used to be a real hospital and still has a clinic attached next door, he would feel off. He talked to the doctors who worked there and they said it was definitely haunted, and nurses that worked nights said they stopped getting scared when they hear noises or voices. It's a scary place. I jinx people all the time over text, like, I'll text somebody the same thing they text me at the same exact time. Sometimes it's really specific shit too. I am sure it's just a confirmation bias, but people in my life actually make comments about it. It happens so frequently. Obviously no one is psychic or any such nonsense, but some days it makes my mind wander. I called my wife out on being extremely moody last night. She stopped, thought about it, and calmed down. On a submarine, we are sometimes pretty abusive toward each other just due to the stress of being underwater for months at a time. Once, one of the guys on our crew was like, "Smith, you're a useless piece of shit," then immediately said, "Sorry, I didn't mean it, I'm just stressed out," and walked away. 5 minutes later he walks back and says, "You know what? I thought about it, and I stand by my statement. Fuck you, Smith." I had a boss like this. He said my ego was too big and that makes it alright to emotionally abuse me. When I was very little, probably 4 or 5 years old, the weirdest thing happened to me and my mom. I was helping my mom as she was planting flowers and other things as this older man came up. I don't remember much of his appearance other than he was black wearing old clothes. He asked if we had something that he could eat and my mom says yes and to wait right there. She and I rush in and make a PBJ sandwich and grab an apple. We come out and he just disappeared. At the time the neighborhood was small with only 4 houses on the street and a large empty field behind us. We weren't gone for maybe 2 minutes and he would have had to really run in order or not be in eyesight. I ask my mom if she remembers that and she has a vague recollection of it but remembers how odd it was that he just disappeared like that. My brother and I were walking on a wooded property in rural Iowa that my grandpa rented for cattle. We've been there many times through our childhood, and know it like the back of our hands. That day seemed strange, almost eerie. It was overcast and oddly quiet. We were walking through a clearing and we heard a tree branch make a loud crack, but it didn't break, and saw it shaking as we heard a loud thud hit the ground. Something took off running onto legs and had a long monkey-like tail. It was probably around 3.5-4 foot tall, just enough that the head and tail barely cleared the weeds it was running through, and it hauled ass. We both looked at each other and said WTFFFFF. We thought anyone we tell would think we were absolutely insane. Well, we decided to mention it to my grandparents since it was the land they kept their cattle on, and without blinking an eye they told us they believe there is a monkey out there. They pulled up on a dog in a ditch near their walking weird, and my grandma said it stopped and turned its head and had very humanoid features. It was all black but with a more skin tone face. She said it startled the hell out of them, but then it took off. Haven't seen it before or since then. I don't think it has anything to do with Bigfoot or anything crazy, and I have a hard time believing someone had a pet monkey that they let loose and it being able to survive the winters and such. So I'm not sure what the hell we saw. My late wife's phone ringing 9 months after it had been put in a drawer with a completely drained battery. I've come to terms with the weather getting warmer and recovering just enough charge to power up one last time, but did put me on edge. I once saw a spider surrounded very closely by like 20 flies all in a circle around the spider and facing the spider. I thought the flies were dead, but when I got too close they all flew away. My greatest regret is not snapping a picture. You save a spider from a vicious death by flies. Unknown to you, the spider pledges a life debt to you. In your darkest hour, the spider arrives. I had a clock fly off the wall right next to me. It was in my basement on the wall to my right. I heard a loud crash and froze for a second. Looked around and noticed the clock was no longer on the wall, but the nail was still in the wall. The clock was on what I believe is called a keyhole hanger, where the head of the nail slots in and you have to lift it up and pull toward you to take it off. This was like 10 years ago and I still to this day think of a way to explain how that happened, and I can't. The clock ended up so far away from where it was I couldn't replicate it. I also woke up one day before school to find a controller for a remote-controlled car that was up on the shelf in my bedroom was on the floor. It had been on the shelf for at least a year. It had a layer of dust on it from being untouched on the shelf. The thing is that dust was undisturbed, so it somehow got thrown off without being touched. There was another item on the shelf next to it that was moved to the point where it was hanging half off the shelf, like the controller hit it on its way off the shelf. No other thing was out of place whatsoever. This could have a logical explanation, but it always weirded me out. It felt like something was trying to get my attention by throwing things at around me. My door recently just slammed open. No one was home. My cat and I were in bed. Got up and shut the door. Ran back to my bed. Then something flew off my desk. Didn't look. Something else flew off. I said hey and then nothing else happened. Honestly, what creeped me out about it the most? A couple of days before, my roommate asked me if I sensed a bad energy in the house. He said something was really bothering him about it and giving him anxiety. I felt it too, but I didn't think it would have anything to do with me because it usually never does. Guess I pissed it off and it wanted to remind me to fuck off. The best success I've heard for getting rid of ghosts and spirits is literally to nicely ask them, aloud, to leave or depart. My friend Tim and I remember an event no one else seems to. When I was in my freshman year of high school, my friend Tim's dad dropped him off at my house so we could attend the Christmas lighting of the City Green. His dad was supposed to drive us both to the event, not just drop him off, but didn't due to miscommunication. My parents were out of town, so we decided to walk to the event, about 3 miles away. We began walking and noticed that the streets were empty for the first 2 miles. It was really odd. As we got closer to the city center, we noticed other people walking on the sidewalks, but they looked dazed. We were a bit concerned because no one was talking and it was really quiet for such a big event. We also both remember feeling a pull, like a compulsion to get to the event. We got fairly close to the green. But then there was this extremely bright light in the sky. It was as if the sky was white and it was about 8 p.m. in the winter. It was like daytime but had no source. This was definitely not the lighting of Christmas lights. This was something very bizarre. As weird as it was, there was this feeling of peace that filled me. It was overwhelming but wonderful. Everyone was staring up silently. Tom and I looked at each other smiling stupidly. Then things got really fuzzy. We both remember holding hands with each other and the people around us. We remember a sense of deep belonging and wonder. Then there was the music everywhere. After that endless moment, we remember walking home with everyone around us silently walking beside us, veering off when they got near their home or side street. There was a deep sense of purpose, but it's hard to define. I can vividly remember all of this. Tom can as well. The next morning we spoke to people about it, but no one remembered. We were especially confused by our friend Lauren, who we both remember seeing in the streets and holding her hand. She told us she went to bed early and missed the event. She had no idea what we were talking about. I think back on that night as some kind of magical event. It's so strange but lovely to think about. It wasn't sinister, just strange and had a sense of unity that is hard to explain. Edited some missed words. When I was about 9 or 10, I was on a holiday in an area we have never been before. On the first day my dad and I went for a walk in the forest. We got lost and he wanted to go back, but I knew the way. I gave him a really detailed description on how to get back. I knew it because I dreamt about it the night before. I could describe the bridge and a big tree further down the road like I had been there before. I am sure there is a logical explanation for this, but I cannot explain it. When I was 19, there was an entire year where birds would randomly commit suicide using my 97 Chevy Cavalier I named Roxy. It started out with one bird on a road trip. I clipped it with my side mirror going 65 miles per hour and its body flew into my driver's window, past me, and hit my passenger behind me in the face. After that, randomly, I would hit birds throughout the weeks. It was as if they were aiming for my car. Then, one day, I was driving with my brother and telling him about the bird suicides involving my car, when we come across a flock of blackbirds on a gravel road. He didn't believe me at the time. I started getting freaked out and stopped the car. He told me to drive and I told him I didn't think they would move. He gave me shit, so I moved forward and they stayed put. I honked the horn and they hopped a little, but still wouldn't get out of the way. My brother looked at me in disbelief. He got out and chased them away. Later that day, as we drove home, I hit another goddamn bird. This was my first unexplained moment in about 3 years and it happened 2 days ago. I woke up about 20 minutes after I fell asleep, judging by the brightness of my room and the state I was in. There was noise that came from what sounded like one end of my room. The noise finally reached my toes and I felt like I was being scanned. It eventually moved up to my head and the other end of the room. It was as if there was some laser powerful enough for me to feel it shining on me. Hard to describe it, as you know, I've never felt anything like that before. The noise was faint at first, but deafening when I felt that my head was being scanned. I just let it happen and I didn't move an inch as I thought that was the best way to assure my survival. The noise finally reached the other end of my room and gradually went quieter until it was silent. About 2 minutes later I started moving my arms and legs a little to make sure that it wasn't a night terror. I thought about getting some hard evidence about the event and I remembered my talk during sleep app that would record noises during night, but I was still too scared to check the app, so I just tried to fall back to sleep. When I woke up I had already forgotten about what happened. Later in the day I was browsing Reddit and I stumbled upon some ghost story on RL. I recalled what happened and went to check the app. My SD card apparently slipped out during the night, and the app was on the SD card, so it didn't record anything. Don't really know what to make of it. When I was 14, a few friends and I were hanging out at a golf course near the Melbourne Zoo at about 3 AM. This was way before 24-hour public transport. All trams would have stopped running at around midnight. We ended up walking around a while, then were sitting down at a tram stop when a tram came up. The number on the tram was 000 and it had a suburb on it that was nowhere near where this tram line was meant to go. Being adventurous teenagers, we got on the tram. There was no one on it except the man driving, who me and everyone else present that night swears was either wearing some really creepy mask or had a weird, plastic-like face and a grin similar to the ones in that movie Truth or Dare. He also had dead straight shoulder-length black hair. He grinned at us as we got on. We asked where the tram was going and he replied, "Where do you want to go?" We sat down, a bit scared, a bit excited, and watched out the window as the tram went really fast, skipping all the tram stops. Two of my friends by this point were freaking out and wanted to get off. We asked him to stop the tram and he did. Nowhere near a tram stop. We got off unfortunately before we could find out what the hell was going on. I still kind of wished we had stayed on the tram to see how it played out. When I told my mum about this years later, she offered a possible explanation for what had happened, but it makes the whole story less spooky, so I won't share that part. Multiple times every day, I think, oh bugger, I've left my tea to go cold and I barely took one sip, and then I look at the cup and it's empty. Then I make another cup of tea and the cycle repeats. I had one night where I fell asleep and woke up and lived the rest of my life until I died in a hospital bed. When my eyes closed in that hospital bed, I actually woke up. I remembered that entire life that I had lived and my wife's, children's, and grandchildren's names. I broke down and cried for hours until I brought myself back together. I was 17 when that happened, and to this day it terrifies me that I remember a lifetime and still have another one to go. I was walking home in college, and the wind blew leaves into a question mark with a dot even. I had a photo somewhere, but Lord knows if I thought to save it. I saw a shadow person when I was about 17. I was at my friend's apartment building, which his parents owned. They let us use this one apartment on the top floor as a sort of hangout spot. A little thing about this building: it's a pretty old building in the Pilsen neighborhood, and according to their dad there were tunnels in the basement left over from Prohibition that he had to cover up. I'm not sure if I believe that part, but it was definitely old and a bit creepy. We would hang out in the apartment, but whenever we wanted to smoke cigarettes we would go to the attic and out to the roof, which was super easy since the top floor is where we had access to that. One night, we were about to go up, but I had to pee, so I told him I'd meet him up there. After I was done, I went up the stairs to the attic and made my way towards the roof access door. There were no lights, so we always used our phones to guide us. This was like 2005, so it wasn't using a flashlight thing like most phones have now, but the screen from an old flip phone. The attic was creepy and cluttered all the time, but that little bit of light helped us navigate. As I made my way to the roof door, I saw a shadow pass by me. It wasn't like my own shadow passing me, because I could see that this thing had mass and was solid. I followed the direction it went, thinking it was my friend trying to scare me. I kept saying that I knew it was him and to stop playing around. It passed me a few more times and then disappeared to the other end of the attic. That's when I heard my friend's voice from downstairs. He got a call from his girlfriend and was in another room talking to her the whole time. I have no idea what that shadow figure was, but it really freaked me out. I told my friend what happened and that I did not want to go back up there. 2. I felt a weird shock, pain and discomfort to the point of me having to stop joking around and having to sit down while I was hanging out with a friend. We were hanging out, sort of dating, in that early teen lovey stage. It turns out that the time it happened coincided with the time of a grandparent's death, which really freaked me out. I was in the car with my brother. I didn't have a seatbelt on because I was young and being a prick. We got to a stop sign and I immediately thought, put your seatbelt on. You're going to be in an accident. And sure enough, we were. It was a minor fender bender. Nothing happened to the people, just cosmetic damages to one of the cars.